it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. My dad and I hunted down the Dogman that killed my sister. By Page Turner 627. I've always hated the smell of gun oil. It clings to everything it touches, soaking deep into the fibers of my clothes, the lining of my backpack, the coarse hair on the back of my hands. Yet here I am, kneeling on the cracked linoleum of our mudroom, a Remington 308 laid across my thighs, and the stench of gun oil sharp in my nostrils. The early morning light barely scratches at the edges of the blinds, dim and grey like the belly of a dead fish. My dad Frank is in the kitchen, clattering around with a coffee pot and mumbling under his breath. Today we're heading up to the woods of northern Michigan, same as we did every year before Leia. Well, before we lost her. Can't help but feel the old scars throbbing as I load bullets into the magazine. It's been 10 years since that hunting trip, the one that tore my family into before and after. Before, when Leia's laughter was a constant soundtrack to our lives. After, when every silence was filled with her absence. We were just kids back then. I was 10, Leia was 8. It was supposed to be a typical hunting trip, one of those bonding experiences Dad was always talking about. But things went wrong. We got separated from Dad somehow. One minute we were following him, the next we were lost, the dense woods closing in around us. Well, Dad says when he found me, I was huddled under a fallen tree, my eyes wide, my body frozen. All I could mutter through chattering teeth was, "Dogman." It was only later, after the search parties had combed every thicket and hollow, that they found her. What remained of Leia was barely recognizable, the evidence of a brutal mauling undeniable. The authorities concluded it was likely a bear attack, but Dad, he never accepted that explanation. He'd seen the tracks, too large and oddly shaped for any bear. As I load another round, the memory flashes, unbidden and unwelcome. Large, hairy, clawed hands reaching out towards us, impossibly big, grotesque in their form. Yet the rest of the creature eludes me, a shadow just beyond the edge of my recall, leaving me with nothing but fragmented terrors and Leia's haunting, echoing screams. My mind blocked most of it out. A self-defense mechanism, I guess. For years after that day, sleep was a battleground. I'd wake up in strange places, kitchen floor, backyard, even at the edge of the nearby creek. My therapist said it was my mind's way of trying to resolve the unresolved, to wander back through the woods searching for Leia. But all I found in those sleepless nights was a deeper sense of loss. It took time, a lot of therapy and patience I didn't know I had, but the sleepwalking did eventually stop. I guess I started to find some semblance of peace. I've mostly moved on with my life. The fragmentary memories of that day are still there, lurking in the corners of my mind, but they don't dominate my thoughts like they used to. I just finished my sophomore year at Michigan State, majoring in environmental science. As for Dad, the loss of Leia broke him. He became a shell of himself. It destroyed his marriage with Mom. He blamed himself for letting us out of his sight, for not protecting Leia. His life took on a single, consuming focus, finding the creature that killed her. Oh, he read every book, every article on cryptids and unexplained phenomena. He mapped sightings, connected dots across blurry photos and shaky testimonies of the Dogman. But as the 10th anniversary of Leia's death approaches, Dad's obsession has grown more intense. He started staying up late, poring over his maps and notes, muttering to himself about patterns and cycles. He's convinced that the Dogman reappears every 10 years, and this is our window of opportunity to finally hunt it down. Well, I'm not nearly as convinced. The whole Dogman thing seems like a coping mechanism, a way for Dad to channel his guilt and grief into something tangible, something he can fight against. But I decided to tag along on this trip, partly to keep an eye on him, but partly because a small part of me hopes that maybe, just maybe, we'll find some kind of closure out there in the woods. I finished loading the rifle and set it aside, standing up to stretch my legs. I wiped my greasy hands on an old rag, trying to get rid of the smell. The early morning light is starting to seep into the room, casting long shadows across the floor. Dad comes out of the kitchen with 2 thermoses of coffee in hand. His eyes are bleary and tired. "Yeah, you ready, Ryan?" he asks, handing me a thermos, his voice rough from too many sleepless nights. "Yeah, I'm ready," I reply, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We load our gear into the truck. The weight of our supplies and weapons a physical reminder of the burden we carry. The drive from Lansing across the lower peninsula is long and quiet, the silence between us filled with unspoken memories and unresolved grief. The drive north is a blur of highway lines and the dull hum of the engine. I drift off, the landscape outside blending into a haze. In my sleep, fragments of that day with Leia replay like scattered pieces of a puzzle. I see her smile, the way she tugged at my sleeve, eager to explore. The sunlight filters through the trees in sharp, jagged streaks. Then the memory shifts, darker, disjointed. Leia's voice echoes, a playful laugh turning into a scream that pierces the air. The crunch of leaves underfoot as something heavy moves through the underbrush. I see a shadow, large and looming, not quite fitting the shapes of any creature I know. And then something darker creeps into the dream, something I've never allowed myself to remember clearly. Before I can see what it is, I wake up with a start as the truck jerks slightly on a rough patch of road. Dad glances over. "Bad dream?" he asks. I nod, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, the remnants of the dream clinging to me like the cold. "Yeah, just thinking about Leia," I manage to say. As we drive, Dad attempts to bridge the silence with small talk. He asks about my finals, my plans for the summer, anything to keep the conversation going. His voice carries a forced cheerfulness, but it's clear his heart isn't in it. I respond when necessary, my answers brief, my gaze fixed on the passing scenery. The landscape changes as we head further north, from flat expanses to rolling hills dotted with dense patches of forest. And it's a beautiful country, the kind that reminds you how vast and wild Michigan can be. But today, it just feels oppressive, like it's closing in on us. We finally arrive at the cabin, nestled deep in the woods, its weathered wood blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. The place hasn't changed much since the last time I was here, a relic from another time, filled with the echoes of our past. I can still see Leia running around the porch, her laughter ringing out in the forest. Dad parks the truck, and we step out into the crisp air. The smell of pine and damp earth fills my nostrils. We start unloading our gear, the tension between us palpable. "Let's get this inside," Dad says, his voice gruff as he hefts a duffel bag onto his shoulder. I nod, grabbing my own bag and following him to the cabin. Inside, it's a mix of old and new, the same rustic furniture, but with new hunting gear and maps strewn across the table. Dad's obsession is evident in every corner of the room, a constant reminder of why we're here. As we unpack, we exchange strained attempts at normalcy. He talks about the latest cryptid sightings he's read about, his eyes lighting up with a fervor that both worries and saddens me. "Did you hear about the sighting up near Alpena?" he asks, laying out his maps on the table. "Yeah, you mentioned it," I reply, trying to muster some enthusiasm. "Do you really think there's something to it?" Dad's eyes meet mine, and for a moment I see a flicker of doubt, but it's quickly replaced by grim determination. "I have to believe it, Ryan. It's the only thing that makes sense." We finish unpacking, the silence between us growing heavier with each passing minute. I step outside to clear my head, the cool air a welcome relief. The sun is starting to set, casting long shadows across the clearing, and I can't shake the feeling of unease. "Yeah, you can take the upstairs room," Dad mutters, His voice is strained, trying to sound normal, but it's clear the weight of the past is heavy on him. I nod, hauling my backpack up the creaking stairs to the small bedroom that I used to share with Leah. The room feels smaller now, or maybe I've just grown too much since those innocent days. I unpack silently, setting my things aside. The bed is stiff and cold under my touch. As I settle in, I can't help but glance at the corner where Leo and I would huddle together, whispering secrets and making plans for adventures that would never happen. I push the thoughts away, focusing on the practicalities of unpacking. After settling in, I go back downstairs to find Dad loading up a backpack with supplies for our hunt. The intensity in his eyes is clear, his hands moving with practiced precision. I know this routine. It's one he's perfected over countless solo trips since that fateful day. "We'll head out early," he says, not looking up from his task. "Gotta make the most of the daylight." I nod, though unease curls in my stomach. I'm not just worried about what we might find or not find out there. I'm worried about him. Each year, the obsession seems to carve him out a bit more, leaving less of the Dad I knew. The morning air is sharp with the scent of pine and wet earth as Dad and I head into the deeper parts of the forest. The terrain is rugged, familiar in its untamed beauty, but there's a tension between us that makes the landscape feel alien. Dad moves with a purposeful stride, his eyes scanning the woods around us. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the underbrush seems to draw his attention. He's on edge, and it puts me on edge too. As we walk, my mind drifts back to that day 10 years ago. I can almost hear Leah's voice echoing through the trees, her high-pitched call as she darted ahead. "Hey, catch me, Ryan." I remember how the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the ground. Oh, those memories are so vivid, so tangible. It feels like I could just turn a corner and see her there, waiting for us. Dad suddenly stops and kneels, examining the ground. He points out a set of tracks that are too large for a deer, with an unusual gait pattern. "Oh, it's been here, Rye. I'm telling you, it's close," he whispers, a mixture of excitement and something darker in his voice. I nod, though I'm not sure what to believe. Part of me wants to dismiss it all as grief-fueled obsession, but another part, the part that heard Leia scream and saw something monstrous in the woods that day, isn't so sure. As we continue, Dad's comments become increasingly cryptic. "Yeah, they say the Dogman moves in cycles, drawn to certain places, certain times, like it's tied to the land itself," he muses, more to himself than to me. His fixation on the creature has always been intense, but now it borders on mania. We set up a makeshift blind near a clearing where Dad insists the creature will pass. Hours drag by with little to see but the occasional bird or distant deer. The sun rises higher in the sky, casting long, slender shadows through the dense canopy. I shift uncomfortably in my spot, the forest floor hard and unyielding beneath me. My eyes dart between the trees, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything to break the monotony. Dad, on the other hand, remains steadfast, his gaze fixed on the tree line, as if he can will the Dogman into existence by sheer force alone. A bird cheeps nearby, startling me. I sigh and adjust my grip on the rifle. I glance over at Dad. "Anything?" I ask, more out of boredom than genuine curiosity. Not yet," he replies, his voice tight. "But it's out there. I know it." I nod, even though I'm not sure I believe him. The forest seems too quiet, too still. Maybe we're chasing ghosts. As the sun begins its descent, the forest is bathed in a warm golden light. The air cools and a breeze rustles the leaves. I shiver, more from anticipation than the cold. The long hours of sitting and waiting are starting to wear on me. Let's call it a day for now," Dad says finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. "We'll head back to the cabin, get some rest, try again tomorrow." I stand and stretch, feeling the stiffness in my muscles. We pack up our gear in silence and start the trek back to the cabin. The walk is long and quiet. The only sounds are the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. Part 2. Dinner is a quiet affair, both of us lost in our thoughts. I try to make small talk, asking Dad about his plans for tomorrow, but it feels forced, and we clean up in silence. After dinner, I retreat to the small bedroom. I lie down, staring at the ceiling. The fatigue from the day's hike has settled into my bones, but sleep still feels like a distant hope. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, the room cloaked in darkness, save for the sliver of moonlight creeping through the window. Downstairs, I hear the faint sound of Dad moving around, likely unable to sleep himself. I drift into sleep, but it's not restful. My dreams pull me back to that fateful day in the woods. Leia's voice is clear and vibrant, her laughter echoing through the trees. She looks just as she did then, bright-eyed and full of life, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she runs ahead of me. "Come on, Rye. You can't catch me," she taunts, her voice playful and teasing. I chase after her, but the scene shifts abruptly. The sky darkens, the woods around us growing dense and foreboding, and Leia's laughter fades, replaced by a chilling silence. I see her ahead, standing still, her back to me. "Leia," I call out, my voice trembling. She turns slowly, her eyes wide and filled with fear. "Ryan, you have to remember," she says, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't what you think. You need to know the truth." Leia's words hang in the air, cryptic and unsettling. Before I can respond, she turns and starts running again, her figure becoming a blur among the trees. Panic rises in my chest as I sprint after her, my feet pounding against the forest floor. "Leia, wait!" I shout, desperation lacing my voice. The forest around me seems to close in, the trees towering and twisted, shadows dancing menacingly in the dim light. I push forward, trying to keep her in sight, but she's too fast, slipping away like a wisp of smoke. Suddenly there's a rustle, a flash of movement in the corner of my vision. Leia screams, a sound that pierces through the heavy silence. It happens too quickly. I can't see what it is, only a dark blur that snatches her up. "Leia!" I scream, my voice breaking. I stumble, falling to my knees as the forest spins around me. My heart races, and the terror is so real, so visceral, that it pulls me back to that awful day, the one that changed everything. I jolt awake, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I sit up, wiping the cold sweat from my forehead as I try to steady my breathing. The room is still dark. The shadows cast by the moonlight seem to flicker and dance on the walls. My heart's still racing from the nightmare, the echo of Leia's scream lingering in my ears. As I struggle to calm down, the floorboards outside my room creak. The door opens slowly, and I see the silhouette of my dad in the doorway, a Bowie knife in his hand, his posture tense. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" I whisper, my voice shaking. "Shh," he hisses, holding up a hand to silence me. "I heard something moving around in the cabin. Stay quiet." I swallow hard, my mouth dry. I glance at the clock on the nightstand. It's just past 3 in the morning. The cabin is silent, the kind of deep, oppressive silence that makes every small sound seem louder. I can't hear anything out of the ordinary, but Dad's expression is deadly serious. He motions for me to get up, and I do, moving as quietly as I can. My heart is racing, a mix of lingering fear from the dream and the sudden sharp anxiety of the present moment. Dad leads the way, stepping cautiously out of the bedroom and into the hallway, the knife held ready in front of him. We move through the cabin, checking each room in turn. The living room is empty, the furniture casting long shadows in the dim moonlight. The kitchen is just as we left it, the plates from dinner still drying on the counter. Everything seems normal, untouched. We finish our sweep of the cabin without finding anything amiss. The silence is heavy, punctuated only by our soft footfalls. I can see the tension in Dad's frame, his grip on the knife unwavering. After checking the last room, we pause in the hallway, the air thick with unspoken questions. "There's nothing here," I say, my voice low. "Are you sure you heard something?" He looks at me, his eyes searching for something in my face. "I heard growling, deep and close. It was right outside the window." "Maybe it was just an animal outside, a raccoon or something," I suggest, although the certainty in his voice makes me doubt my own reassurance. "No, wasn't like that. It was different," he insists, his voice tense. I nod, not wanting to argue, but the seeds of worry are planted deep. The look in his eyes sends a chill down my spine. It's not just fear, it's desperation. The kind of desperation that comes from years of chasing shadows and finding nothing. I can see the toll this hunt has taken on him, the way it's worn him down, turned him into a man I barely recognize. We head back to our rooms. As I lie down, my mind races with thoughts of my dad. I can't help but wonder if he's losing it, if the years of grief and guilt have finally pushed him over the edge. Dad wasn't always like this. Before Leia's death, he was the kind of father who took us fishing, helped with homework, and told terrible jokes that made us groan and laugh at the same time. He was solid, dependable. But losing Leia changed him. The guilt twisted him into someone I barely recognize, someone driven by a need for answers, for closure, that may never come. I try to sleep, but my thoughts keep me awake. I can hear Dad moving around downstairs, probably pacing or double-checking the locks. His paranoia has become a constant presence, and I don't know how to help him. I don't even know if I can help him. The next morning, the sunlight filters weakly through the cabin windows, casting a pale light that does little to lift the heavy mood. I drag myself out of bed, feeling the exhaustion of another restless night. Dad is already up, hunched over his maps at the kitchen table, his eyes bloodshot from the lack of sleep. "Morning," I mumble, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as I pour myself a cup of coffee. "Did you sleep at all?" He shakes his head, not looking up from his notes. "Not much. Couldn't stop thinking about what I heard last night." I sip my coffee, trying to shake off the remnants of my nightmare. "Maybe it was just an animal, Dad. We're deep in the woods, after all." He finally looks up, his eyes intense. "Ryan, I know what I heard. It wasn't just an animal. It was something else." I sigh, not wanting to argue. "Okay, fine, Dad. What's the plan for today?" "We're going back out. I found some tracks yesterday and I want to follow them. See where they lead." I nod, feeling a mix of apprehension and resignation. I can see how much this means to him, how desperate he is for any kind of lead. All right, well, let's get packed and head out. We spend the morning preparing, loading up our gear and double-checking our supplies. Dad is meticulous, going over everything with a fine-tooth comb. I try to match his focus, but my mind keeps drifting back to Leia and the dream I had. Her words echo in my head, cryptic and unsettling. "You need to know the truth." We set off into the woods, the air crisp and cool. The forest is alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, but it all feels distant, like background noise to the tension between us. Dad leads the way, his eyes scanning the ground for any sign of the tracks he found yesterday. As we walk, I can't help but notice how erratically he's acting. He mutters to himself, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to jump out at us. His grip on his rifle is tight, his knuckles white. "Dad, are you okay?" I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. He glances at me, his expression unreadable. "I'm fine, just focused." He stops frequently to examine the ground or the bark of trees, pointing out marks and signs that seem meaningless to me. "Yeah, look at this," he says, crouching down to examine a broken branch. "See how it's snapped? Well, that's not a deer or a bear. That's something bigger, stronger." I crouch next to Dad, squinting at the broken branch. Well, to me, it just looks like a regular broken branch, the kind you see all over the forest. "I don't know, Dad. It just looks like a branch to me," I say, trying to keep my voice neutral. Dad's eyes flicker with frustration. "You're not looking close enough. It's the way it snapped. Too clean, too deliberate. Something did this." I nod, not wanting to argue. "Okay, sure. But even if you're right, it could be anything. A storm, another hunter." His expression hardens. "I know what I'm looking for. This is different." I sigh, feeling the weight of the past and the tension between us pressing down on me. "Dad, I had a dream last night about Leia." Those words hang in the air between us, heavy and fraught with unspoken emotions. Dad's eyes widen, and he straightens up, his entire demeanor shifting. "What kind of dream? What did you see?" His voice is urgent, almost desperate. "Well, it was, strange. We were in the woods, like we are now, but everything felt different. Leia was there, running out ahead of me, laughing." Then she stopped and told me I needed to know the truth, that it wasn't what I thought. Dad grabs my shoulders, his grip tight. "Hey, what else did she say? Did she tell you anything specific? Anything about the creature?" I shake my head, feeling a chill run down my spine. "No, that was it. She just said I needed to know the truth. And then she was gone." Dad's grip on my shoulders tightens, and his eyes bore into mine with a mixture of desperation and hope. "Ryan, you have to try to remember. Now, think hard. What did the creature look like? Did you see anything else?" I pull back slightly, uneasy with his intensity. "Dad, I told you. I don't remember. It was just a dream. A nightmare, really. My mind's probably just mixing things up." He lets go of me and runs a hand through his hair, looking frustrated and lost. "Dreams can be important. They can hold memories we've buried deep. Please, try to remember. This could be a sign, a clue." I rub my temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. "I've tried, okay? I've tried for years to piece together what happened that day. But it's all just fragments, like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit. The dream, it felt real, but I don't think it's telling me anything new." Dad's face falls, and he looks older than I've ever seen him. He turns away, staring into the forest as if it holds all the answers. As we make our way back to the cabin, the sun begins to set, casting shadows through the trees. The air grows colder, and I shiver, pulling my jacket tighter around me. Dad is silent, lost in his thoughts, his face drawn and haggard. Back at the cabin, we unload our gear once again in silence. Dad disappears into his room, muttering something about going over his notes. I decide to explore the cabin, hoping to find something that might help me understand what's going on with him. In the attic, I find a box of old family photos and documents. As I sift through the contents, I come across a worn journal with Dad's handwriting on the cover. Curiosity gets the better of me and I open it, flipping through the pages. The journal is filled with notes and sketches, detailing his obsession with the Dogman. But there's something else. Entries that talk about Leia, about that day in the woods. His handwriting becomes more erratic, the words harder to read. And one entry stands out, dated just a few days after Leia's death. June 15th, 2013. It was supposed to be a normal trip. Keep them close, Frank, I kept telling myself. But I failed. Leia is gone and it's my fault. I heard her scream, saw the shadows. Tried to get to her, but the thing, it was there. Too fast and too strong. My hands, blood everywhere. God, no one will believe me. I can't even believe myself. No, I have to find it. I have to protect Ryan. I have to make it right. God, what have I done? Before I can read further, the attic door creaks open and Dad's voice slices through the stillness. Yeah, what are you doing up here? His tone is sharp, almost panicked. I turn to see him standing in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide with something between anger and fear. I clutch the journal to my chest, my mind racing. I found this. I was just trying to understand it. In an instant, he crosses the room and snatches the journal from my hands. Oh, his grip is tight, his knuckles white. You had no right, he growls, his voice trembling. Dad, I just wanted to know the truth, I shout, frustration boiling over. What really happened to Leia? His eyes flash with a mix of rage and anguish, and before I can react, he slaps me across the face. The force of it knocks me off balance, and I stumble backward, my cheek stinging. For a moment, there's a stunned silence. We both stand there, breathing hard, the air thick with tension. I'm sorry, my dad says finally, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to. He trails off, clutching the journal to his chest like a lifeline. I touch my cheek, feeling the heat from the slap, and take a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Dad, what aren't you telling me? What really happened that day? Stay out of it, Ryan, Dad growls, his eyes dark with anger. You don't know what you're messing with. He turns and storms out of the attic, and I'm left standing there, my cheek throbbing, my mind racing. What the fuck is going on? What really happened to Leia? And what is Dad so afraid of? Part 3. That night, I sleep with my rifle within arm's reach, more afraid of my dad than any dogman. The slap still burns on my cheek, and the look in his eyes, rage, fear, something darker, haunts me. I lie awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old cabin, every sound amplified in the stillness. Eventually, exhaustion pulls me under, and I fall into a restless sleep. The dream returns, vivid and unsettling. I'm back in the woods, chasing after Leia. Her laughter echoes through the trees, a haunting reminder of happier times. This time, though, I push myself harder, refusing to let her slip away. Ryan, catch me, she calls, her voice playful. I'm coming, Leia, I shout, my legs pumping, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest around us is a twisted, shadowy maze, the trees seeming to close in on us. Leia's figure becomes clearer, her blonde hair catching the dim light filtering through the canopy. She stops suddenly, turning to face me, her eyes wide with fear. Leia, what is it? I ask, my voice trembling. Look behind you, she whispers, her voice barely audible. I turn slowly, dread creeping up my spine. In the shadows, I see a figure, its form indistinct and shifting. It's not quite an animal, not quite human, something in between. The sight of it sends a jolt of terror through me, and I wake up with a start, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I'm not in my bed. The ground beneath me is cold and hard, the smell of damp earth filling my nostrils. Panic rises as I realize I've sleepwalked into the woods. I scramble to my feet, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The moon casts a pale glow over the surroundings, revealing what looks like a long-abandoned animal lair. The walls are covered in giant claw marks, deep gouges in the wood and earth. The air is heavy with the scent of decay, and a chill runs through me. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Carefully, I start to move, my eyes scanning the ground, desperate for a familiar landmark. That's when I see them, faded scraps of fabric caught on the jagged edges of the underbrush. My steps falter, a sense of dread washing over me as I bend down to examine them. The fabric is torn, weathered by time and the elements, but unmistakably familiar. It's part of Leia's jacket, the bright pink one she wore on the day she disappeared. As I strain to make sense of it all, a rustling sound behind me snaps my focus. My heart leaps into my throat. I spin around, my hand instinctively reaching for the rifle I don't have, because, of course, I didn't bring it into my unconscious state. The shadowy figure that emerges from the trees is unsettlingly familiar, mirroring the menacing forms of my nightmares. But as it steps into the moonlight, I recognize the worn jacket, the weary posture. It's Dad. "Ryan," he calls out, his voice a mix of relief and stern concern. "Oh, I've been looking for you everywhere. What the hell are you doing out here?" I exhale slowly, the terror ebbing away as reality sets back in. I don't know, Dad. I must have sleepwalked again." My voice is shaky, my earlier dreams still clinging to the edges of my consciousness. Dad stares at me in disbelief. "You haven't sleepwalked since you were a kid, right? This isn't just a coincidence." His eyes dart around, taking in the surroundings. The eerie, claw-marked den, the unsettling quiet of the woods. "How did you even find this place?" I shake my head, struggling to find an answer. "I don't know, Dad. I woke up here." The uncertainty in my voice does nothing to ease the tension. His eyes lock onto the tattered remains of Leia's jacket in my hands, and something inside him snaps. The color drains from his face as he stumbles a few steps backwards. This is where it happened," he murmurs, his voice barely a whisper. "This is where we found Leia." "I thought you said you don't remember anything from that night," he says accusingly. "I swear, Dad, I don't know anything about this place," I insist, my own heart pounding. "Oh, it was you, wasn't it? You've been hiding this from me." His voice is frantic. "You, last night, the growling, it was you." His voice rises, tinged with hysteria. I step back, my pulse racing, feeling the chill of the night and the weight of his accusation. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." "No," he interrupts, his voice breaking as he points a trembling finger at me. "You knew. You always knew. It was you, Ryan. All these years, the evidence was right there, but I refused to see it. You were the Dogman. You killed Leia." His words hit me like a physical blow, absurd and horrifying in their implications. "Dad, you're not making any sense. You're talking crazy. I was just a little kid. I mean, how could I protest, my voice shaky. He steps closer, his presence looming over me, the outline of his figure distorted by the shadows of the trees. Oh, think about it. It all makes sense now. You led us here to this place because you remember, because you did it." "Dad, stop it," I shout, my heart pounding in my chest. "You're scaring me. You need help, professional help. This isn't you." And he's beyond reason, his eyes wild with a haunted grief. I have to end this," he mutters, more to himself than to me, his hand tightening around his rifle. His finger hovers dangerously over the trigger. My instincts kick in, and I know I have to act fast. I lunge toward him, trying to knock the weapon away, but he's quicker than I expected. We struggle, our breaths heavy in the cold night air, the sounds of our scuffle the only noise in the otherwise silent woods. His strength surprises me, fueled by his frantic emotions. He shoves me back, and I stumble over a root, my balance lost for a crucial second. And that's all he needs. He raises his rifle, his intentions clear in his wild, pained eyes. I dive to the ground just as the shot rings out, a deafening blast that echoes ominously through the trees. The bullet whizzes past, narrowly missing me, embedding itself in the dark of an old pine. I scramble to my feet, my heart pounding in my ears, and I start running. The underbrush claws at my clothes and skin, but I push through, driven by a primal urge to survive. "Dad, stop! It's me, Ryan!" I shout back as I dodge between the trees. Another shot breaks the silence, closer this time, sending splinters of wood flying from a nearby tree trunk. It's surreal, being hunted by my own father, a man tormented by grief and lost in his delusions. I don't stop to look back. I can hear him crashing through the forest behind me, his heavy breaths and muttered curses carried on the wind. The terrain is rough and I'm fueled by adrenaline, but exhaustion is setting in. I need a plan. Ahead, I see a rocky outcrop, make a split-second decision to head for it. It offers a chance to hide, to catch my breath and maybe reason with him if he catches up. As I reach the rocks, I slip behind the largest one, my body pressed tight against the cold, damp surface. I hear his footsteps approaching, slow and cautious now. As I press against the rock, trying to calm my racing heart, I can hear Dad's footsteps drawing closer, each one crunching ominously on the forest floor. Oh, he's methodical, deliberate, like a hunter stalking his prey. "Come out, Ryan." Dad's voice is ragged, filled with a blend of fury and pain. My heart pounds against my chest, the cold sweat on my back making me shiver against the rough surface of the rock. I know I can't just sit here. It's only a matter of time before he finds me. Taking a deep breath, I peek around the edge of the rock, trying to gauge his position. I see him, rifle raised, scanning the area slowly. This might be my only chance to end this madness without further violence. I need to disarm him, to talk some sense into him if I can. As quietly as I can, I move out from behind the rock, my steps careful to avoid any twigs or leaves that might betray my position. I'm almost upon him when a branch snaps under my foot. It sounds so trivial, yet so alarmingly loud in the quiet of the woods. Dad whirls around, looking completely unhinged. "Ryan," he exclaims, his rifle swinging in my direction. Panic overtakes me and I lunge forward, my hands reaching for the gun. We struggle, the rifle between us, our breaths heavy and erratic. "Dad, please stop," I plead, trying to wrestle the gun away. But he's strong, stronger than I expected. In the chaos, the rifle goes off. The sound is deafening, a sharp echo that seems to reverberate off every tree around us. Pain explodes in my abdomen, sharp and burning, like nothing I've ever felt before. I stagger back, my hands instinctively going to the wound. The warmth of my own blood coats my fingers, stark and terrifying. Dad drops the rifle, his eyes wide with horror. "Oh my God, what have I done?" he gasps, rushing to my side as I collapse onto the forest floor. As the pain sears through me, a strange, overpowering energy surges within. Oh, it's wild, primal, unlike anything I've ever experienced. Looking down in horror, my hands are no longer hands but large, hairy, clawed appendages. The transformation is rapid, consuming. My vision blurs, senses heighten, and a raw guttural growl builds in my throat. In that moment, a flood of understanding washes over me, mingling with the horror of realization. These are the hands of the creature from my nightmares, the creature whose face I can never fully recall because, as I now understand, it is me. What happens next feels detached, as if I'm no longer in control of my own actions, watching from a distance as my body moves on its own. I turn towards my dad, his face a mask of terror. He stumbles back, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of what his son has become. The forest around us seems to fall silent, holding its breath as the nightmarish scene unfolds. I can hear my own growls, guttural and deep, filling the air with a sound that's both foreign and intimately familiar. The pain in my abdomen fuels a dark, violent urge, an urge that's too strong to resist. With a ferocity that feels both alien and intrinsic, I move towards him. My dad, paralyzed by fear and shock, doesn't run. Maybe he can't. Maybe he doesn't want to. The encounter is brutal and swift, a blur of motion and violence. My dad barely puts up a struggle, as though resigned to his fate. Not that there's anything he can do. The creature that I've become is too powerful, too consumed by the wild instincts surging through me. Tear him apart limb from bloody limb. My hands, no, my claws, rending through fabric and flesh with a disgusting ease. The sound of my dad's screams, of tearing fabric and flesh, is drowned out by the animalistic growls that echo through the trees. When it's all over, the red mist that had clouded my vision begins to fade. The fierce, uncontrollable rage that drove my actions subsides. I'm left standing, my breaths heavy and erratic, in the eerie stillness of the forest. The transformation reverses as quickly as it came on, and I find myself back in my human form. My clothes are ripped to shreds, hanging off my frame in tattered remnants. At my feet lies what's left of my dad, his body torn and unrecognizable. I glance down at my abdomen, expecting agony, but instead find my wound miraculously healed. No sign of the gunshot remains, just a faint scar where I expected a bloody mess. Shock sets in, a numbing disbelief mixed with a gut-wrenching realization of what I've become and what I've done. My hands, now human again, tremble as I look at them, half expecting to see the claws that had so effortlessly ripped through the flesh and bone. But there's only blood, my father's blood against my skin. I stand there for what feels like an eternity, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Eventually, the shock wears thin, and a cold practicality takes hold. I need to get out of here. I need to cover my tracks, to disappear. Because who would believe this? Who would understand that I didn't choose this? That I'm not a monster by choice? With trembling hands, I do what's necessary. I bury my dad in a shallow grave, the physical act of digging strangely grounding. I cover him with leaves and branches, a pitiful attempt to hide the brutality of his end. I take a moment, whispering apologies into the wind, knowing full well that nothing I say can change what happened. I leave the forest behind, my mind a whirl of dark thoughts. As I walk, the first hints of dawn brush against the horizon, the sky bleeding a soft pink. It's hauntingly beautiful. Did you see it coming? Go on, be honest, tell me. Did you see that ending coming? That little twist? I didn't for the longest time, to be honest with you. So really quite a nice surprise when I read that. I thought, oh, wow. Okay, so tell me what you thought. Maybe it was obvious to you right the way through. Another great story there from Paige Turner, 6 to 7. As always, delight to read one of those stories. So thank you very much. Anyway, that is enough for me for this evening. I'll be back again on Wednesday. I've got some long stories in the process of being recorded. I don't know, things have just been like stopping me from sitting down for a couple of hours and doing the whole thing. But longer ones coming up, a really incredible story set in Afghanistan. So yeah, I don't tell too much before I actually do it. But yeah, that's probably 4 or 5 hours worth of story in that one. So anyway, I'm waffling on. All right. Till next time, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Tales from a Town That Doesn't Exist Anymore by Young Seti. Part 1. I glanced down at the clock on my dashboard. 10:02 it read in glowing green numbers amidst the darkness. Almost 30 minutes on the dot since we'd entered the town. It was a nondescript little place. Short, squat grey and brown buildings with signs introducing local businesses line the streets in the areas where small but homey residential houses bunched close together amidst well-kept lawns were not. Nothing too picturesque, but a standard Rust Belt town that, although it had clearly seen better days, had kept on chugging until it was a passable, if not at times pleasant, place to live. I knew the type well. My hometown in central Illinois had been much the same. Beyond that, I was familiar with this very town, having passed through it on the way to the campsite my friends, Phil and Clay, and I had spent the weekend at. It reminded me of days past, the sort of place frozen in time. It was that familiarity that made the place stand out to me on the way to our campsite. The town marked the 4-hour point of our drive, and had been made something of a landmark as we were determined to stop there for gas and some snacks on the way back. Yet as we pulled off of the empty highway, the first thing that had begun to grip me was the silence. From the moment we'd entered the town, driving down what seemed to be the main road through the place, we'd been greeted by nothing more than the staggering silence and a smell that seemed to linger faintly. There are few things that can truly, deeply unnerve a person. One of these things is true and utter silence. I'm not talking about the silence of a quiet home, with neighbors' cars and distant yapping dogs audible from beyond your walls. No, true silence, especially in a place where there ought to be the opposite. That was what we experienced rolling back through the town that had previously been as busy as any other along the highway. With the exception of my vehicle, and that which carried my friends behind me, there was nothing. No distant roar of traffic on surrounding streets, the odd squeal of a brake, the honk of a horn, and the call of a pedestrian. Well, it was more than just a lack of noise, however. There were no birds, joggers, or people walking dogs, and no cars on the road. I felt an uneasy twinge in my gut, like something plucking at a loose fabric, and found myself turning to my passenger seat to speak to my wife, an act of habit before finding it empty. Of course, I recalled the feeling of reacquainting myself with reality, a bitter one. She's not here. That's the whole reason you're on this trip. The camping trip had been Phil's idea following my divorce, as a way to get me out of the funk they'd insisted I'd entered, and he and Clay had battered me with it until I reluctantly gave in. We'd spent a week campground hopping around the state, while making our way back towards our homes in the exurbs of Chicago. We passed through the town on our way to one of the state parks much further south, and it had stood out to me. It had been a relatively quiet place then, but still with plenty of folks out and about on their business. It seemed like the kind of town that still had a local hardware store, not called Ace or Home Depot, and folks had Sunday breakfast at the local diner. And when I first passed through, I felt oddly drawn to it in a nostalgic sort of way that made me think of better bygone days. I resolved it would be one of our pit stops on the way back upstate. The plan had been to fill up at the gas station, maybe stop for breakfast at the little local watering hole, before continuing on our journey and recharging our batteries in this Rockwell painting of a town. Part of me, the part seeking any logical explanation till the point of logic, thought perhaps it was all an effect of the weather, both the impossibly sudden emptiness of the place and the sort of surreal, almost dreamlike disquiet that seemed to hang in the air everywhere. It had been staggeringly sunny on our initial pass through, a rare sort of day in Illinois as the summer allowed an early peek through the spring, whereas now it was overcast. Angry grey clouds hung overhead, growing blacker and more foreboding by the minute. With them there was a feeling of static in the air, and a breeze carried through the empty streets, lone and errant, and on it a chill of winter. A larger part of me knew how ridiculous that thought was. I'd seen some bad weather in my day, even a few historic blizzards. Never seen an entire town utterly empty. Yet the last 10 minutes had been spent driving slowly along the main road, my car in the lead as we retraced our previous step through what seemed to be the main plaza of the quiet town. A sign painted on a dull green background, tucked within a floral display read, "Welcome to beautiful Criers Creek, Illinois. Population 4,673. As far as I looked, I saw neither hide nor hair of a single one of those almost 5,000 people. Lights remained shining through storefronts with no one to man them. Stoplights turned red, then green, then yellow, all the same, though the road was deserted, except for our two vehicles. Cars remained in parking spots lining the streets, somehow feeling like old, ancient fossils, their presence made ominous in the terrible silence. They made my gut tighten like a fist, a pool of anxiety forming a steady drip at the back of my mind. Ring! The sudden chime of my phone shattered the relative silence, making me jump in my seat. For the first time since entering the town, for the first time in a while, I was glad to be riding alone and no one could see my jumpiness. Phil, the screen read, urging me to answer or deny the call. I did the former. "Hey," I answered, eyes still squinting as I peered out the window. I still expected, or hope might be a better word for it, to see someone, catch some glimpse of motion passing behind a window, or catch a distant eye watching from a window as if this were all some trick the whole town was in on. "Hey," Phil's voice was unusual, shaky, with a tinge of emotion not characteristic of him. I was reluctant to call it fear, but... "Hey, listen, either Clay and I are losing our fucking minds." We rounded a corner, onto a street leading to a roundabout centered around what was clearly the town park. A statue of some long-dead figure sat atop a horse with a sword drawn and a stern face which was the only facsimile of life visible. Or... there's literally nobody in this town but us. I felt the blood in my veins go cold at hearing the uneasy realization spoke aloud, as though the strange reality was made concrete in doing so. "Yeah," I said reluctantly. It looks like it." "Guys, I'm not gonna lie, bro." Clay's voice came over the line, and even through the phone I could hear the palpable disquiet heavy in his tone. "I'm getting an awful feeling about this." An icy chill rippled through me at that. He wasn't wrong, of course. Since we'd entered the city limits, the air had felt almost charged with an uneasy, surreal sort of energy. The sort of feeling you get in a place that has just experienced great tragedy or upheaval. If you've ever walked through the remains of a house burnt in a fire, or seen a town rendered unrecognizable by a heavy storm, you know the feeling. As though every inch was a warning of how vulnerable we all truly are, a stark reminder of our own fleeting nature. And yet, as we moved through those streets, taken by a silence that I could find no logical explanation for, with every bit of daunting unease I felt, there seemed a greater, nagging sort of curiosity. Something about it all bothered me, the suddenness of it. I mean, places don't just up and desert like that. People don't all just leave their homes, the jobs, and the town they've known and loved. No, it felt like there was something more to it. and for some reason I felt compelled to know what. Feels like I only go backwards. I nearly leapt from my skin as the radio kicked to life, filling my car with the croon of a sudden unfamiliar voice. I squinted hard at the radio, which had ceased working from the moment I'd entered the town, as though it might somehow explain the sudden interruption, which was over just as soon as it had started. On the other end, I could hear a similar burst of sound, followed by Phil's cursing in surprise. This town is a goddamn dead zone for signals. Radio on the shitter. My data's cutting in and out. Where are we going anyway, man? There was a diner I saw when we passed through the first time. Cute little spot. Reminded me of where Jenna and I first... I swallowed the sudden knot in my throat, surprised by the emotion I felt at the memory. It reminded me of a spot I used to eat at in college. There was a silence from the other end, and I could all but see the looks pass between them at the mention of my ex-wife, a mixture of concern and mild irritation. Well, doesn't look like there'll be much in the way of service, Clay chimed in. Of course, I knew he was correct, and yet in the moment the idea of turning back somehow filled me with an unusual sort of apprehension. It's the feeling one has when forgetting something important, like a meeting or a gathering, aware only that it's slipped their mind, but not of what or how. Yeah, probably, but I'd still like to check it out. Come on, boys, I offered, trying my best to lighten the mood. Where's your sense of adventure? After a moment of silence, Clay responded. Okay, lead the way. See you there. So I did, navigating the stark emptiness of the streets with them in tow. Only the faint whistle of the wind moving between the buildings and the creak of wavering streetlights, none of which seemed to follow any discernible sort of pattern, only working in seemingly random intervals. Every so often, the radio would spark to life, only to sputter off just as quickly. I tried to keep my eyes on the road. There was something about the lifelessness of the buildings that seemed to play to one's imagination. If I let my eyes linger too long, I could swear there were figures, barely more than shadows, and only there for a moment, darting behind curtains and walls. After a few minutes we arrived, pulling into a parking lot with a few dozen cars scattered throughout, as if from some morning breakfast rush we hadn't seen. After a moment of mustering my confidence, I stepped from the car, making my way across to the door. It was only the sound of my feet sliding across the pavement and the rumble of the car behind me. A smell filled the air, like that of an old television set. Ozone. The word emerged like a thought whispered from somewhere. Behind me, Phil and Clay pulled into the lot, quickly stepping from the car and following behind me, muttering to themselves. As I arrived at the door, I felt confusion give way to apprehension, and a cold sweat began to bead above my brow. The doorway had been blocked, doors and chairs all piled in front in some makeshift excuse for a barricade. The three of us paused for a moment as Clay and Phil caught up, a glance passing between us all that seemed to carry a different meaning in every eye, though all expressed an obvious disquiet. I knocked on the door, peering in through the dust-covered window for any sign of who might have piled all of the furniture, but found only an empty diner. Half-eaten meals, cell phones, a lone laptop all sat around, the signs of life in motion, yet with none of their owners to be found. I tried to stifle the chill I felt as the skeletal fingers of dread seemed to run along my spine gently. Yeah, help me push this, I implored, grunting as I positioned my shoulder against the door and began to push with great exertion. The two looked at each other for a moment, before Phil gave a shrug, his eyes meeting Clay's in a look that seemed to say, well, we might as well, before adding his effort to my own. The door gave a hiss as we managed to pry it open almost half a foot, sending the chairs piled on the other side clattering to the ground in a cacophony that made my heart lurch. Such a sudden change from the utter silence. I coughed once, then twice, as my throat stung for a moment, that odd ozone smell seeming to grow stronger on the breeze. You, think this is a good idea? Clay asked, still standing behind us. His arms were crossed, and there was a look on his face that I didn't like. It made me feel analyzed, like I was back in those marriage counseling sessions, being mentally picked apart by my wife and therapist, both of whom seemed only to exist to point out my every flaw. I bit back a retort, tasting the venom at the back of my throat, swallowing hard despite the irritation, his attitude rising like floodwaters. I think there's a town full of people that just up and disappeared. I think there's something I can't just drive away from. I raised an eyebrow. You're a goddamn biology professor, for the love of God. Shouldn't you have, some sort of scientific curiosity or something? Clay narrowed his eyes in a look of mild irritation, pursing his lips for a moment before muttering a few expletives and adding his strength to ours. The door and the tables piled on the other end groaned in protest as we pushed it open as far as it would go. One by one, we slipped through the opening and into the diner. Fluorescent lights hummed and crackled, seeming to grow brighter as we entered, bathing the sky blue wallpaper and vomit green tiles on the floor in a hospital-esque glow. It somehow made the situation feel all the more surreal and unwelcoming, pairing with the silence to turn what otherwise seemed your common small-town diner into an utterly unfamiliar and alien place. Outside, the wind seemed to pick up on the surreality that seemed to fill the air and made the windows groan in protest against it. Clay made his way towards the counter, ringing the lone bell several times. Enough, man. Oh, Christ, Phil chided. There's nobody here. Clay shrugged before climbing onto the counter. Yeah, what are you doing? I demanded as Clay slid over the counter, still bearing half-finished coffees and meals and onto the other side. Making a damn coffee, he grunted, grabbing an untouched sausage from one of the plates and taking a bite. I felt the need to argue, but after a moment, could think of no reason why. And the place was abandoned. It wasn't like anyone was coming. And yet, I couldn't help but feel a need to be silent, as though any overwhelming noise might attract the attention of, well, that didn't feel quite as clear. Coffee, boys? Anyone? Clay asked, waving his cup at us and spilling a bit on the linoleum. Phil nodded, and Clay made his way back to the machine. I muttered a no thanks, continuing around the diner. A laptop a few tables away caught my attention. It was open, the screen still glowing, though it was dim. I made my way closer, eyeing it suspiciously. Beside it sat a set of keys and a wallet. I couldn't help but feel a chill at the sight. All things no one would leave behind unless left without a choice. We shouldn't be here. This thought forced its way through my head, and I tried to dismiss it, curiosity still burning. Still, I found myself sliding into the booth in front of the laptop, celebrating silently that it was still open. On the screen, I immediately recognized the Facebook Messenger, having had to answer plenty of, "Hey, we're here if you need anything," messages from folks I hadn't heard from in years after my divorce. I felt a twinge of unease as I realized I was reading someone's messages. This was certainly already an invasion of privacy, to be sure. Now it felt even more so. Still, I continued, pushed on by an almost feverish need to understand what was happening. As I began to read, I felt icicles forming along the walls of my veins, my blood turning to icy slush and my insides to liquid. The account belonged to a Dan Almond, a slightly older gentleman in his mid-50s, and the messages were between him and another man, Kevin, who was clearly his son. Earlier ones made it clear the kid was away at college. I love you, kiddo. Your mom loves you. We all love you so much, and I'm so proud of you. The first message sent that day read. There's, something going on here in town. Can't explain it. Don't seem anyone can, but I don't think your mama and I are going to be there for your graduation, bud. I'm sorry. Just don't come home. Don't come back to Criers Creek. Ain't nothing good here for you anymore. Dad? You okay? What the hell is going on? I've been getting texts and seeing things on Snapchat all day about something flying over the town. Is Mum okay?" "She's with me, kiddo. We're together. I can't tell you what's going on. Don't even know myself. I just know we can't go outside. People are disappearing, straight up into the sky like the rapture. But I don't think this has nothing to do with God." So Mr. O'Reilly yanked straight off the ground. Heard him scream until he stopped all of a sudden. His son's responses came soon after, frantic and questioning, followed by a call that wasn't answered. "Dad, pick up. Who's Mr. O'Reilly?" "Dad, please pick up the phone." "I'm sorry. You got no idea how much I'd like to hear your voice right now, but we have to be quiet. I'm at the Larry's with your mom. Folks here have got the doors all barricaded up. Can't help but think it won't do much good, though." I felt a cold creeping up along my spine, a cold, awful dread sowing itself deep into the fields of my mind. I can hear it now, over us. A damn thing sounds like a truck. I love you, kiddo. Never forget it. That was the final text sent from Dan. There were a few more from his son, desperate and pleading for a response, followed by a string of calls that went unanswered, and then nothing. I took a breath, feeling an uneasy tremor developing. The sounds of clinking plates and glasses as Clay and Phil cooked themselves breakfast seemed to fade into the background as I found myself reading the conversation again and again. Any doubts I'd had as to whether or not something awful had happened here faded rapidly. I still can't be certain what drove me to make the call. Perhaps it was the unease and the hope that somehow the young man would be able to offer some rational explanation. Perhaps even explaining how his father had been mistaken and the town had been evacuated due to a gas leak or some similarly mundane reason. Well, it may not bode well for us, but the longer I sat there, the less I felt anything would, and at least that response might quell the rising dread I was feeling. It was like being a child again, a fear of something nebulous and formless, yet dreadfully present all the same. The chime of the call ringing filled the diner, drawing both other sets of eyes towards me, both asking the same silent questions. After a moment, there was finally an answer. "Hello?" The voice belonged to a man who couldn't have been older than 20-something. "Hi, is this Kevin?" There was a pause. "Yeah, who's this?" I felt a twinge of unease at the tone of his response, questioning but not nearly as worried as I'd expect someone to sound when receiving a call from a stranger on their apparently missing father's Facebook. I'm a friend of Dan," I lied, hoping it hadn't sounded quite as obvious as it felt. There was another silence, longer than before. I could swear there was palpable tension in it. It was as if I could hear the gears turning in his head. "I don't know any Dan. Sorry, man, wrong guy." My heart struck hard against the inside of my chest as I tried to swallow the unyielding knot of dread that had formed in my throat somewhere along the way. Phil's questioning look grew worried, surely seeing the fear on my face. Clay looked irritated and uneasy as he mouthed a "what?" in my direction, clearly wanting to be caught up. Feeling the creep of anxiety as it began to brim over and unsure of what else to say, I elected for the uneasy truth. Your father, Dan. I found his laptop in a diner in a town called Cryers Creek. I think something may have happened to him. Listen, man, I told you you've got the wrong guy. I never knew either of my parents. Got no memory of them." Some palpable emotion at the end of his words that I could tell he was trying to restrain, yet it felt as though he was telling the truth, or at least the truth as he believed it, despite the evidence the previous messages laid out. It made my skin crawl, and my stomach tighten like a fist, an inhuman dread gripping me firmly in its clutches. The wind outside grew heavy, and the windows all seemed to yawn and groan in simultaneous protest, the sounds forming a frightful symphony. I peered outside one of the windows that stretched along the walls on either side and could see nothing in the empty streets and even less in the skies above. The clouds all seemed to threaten an approaching storm, the sort that transforms streets into rivers and fields into swamps, a force capable of changing the face of the earth beneath it. And yet, not a raindrop was to be seen. Just clouds. Clouds behind which, if I looked for too long, I could see shapes moving within, large and darker even than the surrounding grey, but gone as soon as I'd thought they'd appeared. Search for something, anything to say that would lead us to a rational answer. It had always been in my nature, a need to be right, that made confusion feel all but unacceptable. I've never seen how it could be a negative, the pursuit of knowledge. Now I wonder if, perhaps, I simply refused to. Honey doesn't remember his father. The thought rang like a question to which I could find no answer. Sorry, man, but I'm going to have to ask you not to contact me again. Please. Good luck with whatever. Wait, please, The laptop chimed with a cheer I didn't feel as the call ended. I tried again, but there was no answer. Before I could go for a third, the account had been blocked. What the fuck was that about? Clay asked, his unease apparent, eyes darting between myself and Phil, who didn't look any better himself. I could think of nothing else to do but tell them the truth. When I was through, there was a silence for a moment that seemed to linger for hours between the three of us. We need to go, Phil finally chimed. If any of that's true, then we need to get out of this place now. Clay nodded, sliding his plate away and making his way over the counter and towards the door. To my own surprise, I felt a bloom of apprehension, feeling an argument building inside of me. Well, they were right, obviously. Something was going on that I could make no sense of, and yet, still, I wanted to understand. People don't just disappear. None of this was possible. For reasons that still escape me, I felt driven to prove it. Yet the look on their faces made me uneasy. It was the face you'd expect from the crew of a ship far too long at sea to the captain who denied them a return home. The entire trip had been for me, and though I may not have called for it, it was certainly my decision to visit this town and my choices that had kept us here. Something told me that disagreement might not be an option at this point. I stood and slid from the booth, casting one last glance at the laptop before nodding my agreement. Clay gave a brief nod and had turned to open the door when... There was a sound like a train derailing or a bomb going off, or both, somewhere close by, sent all three of us scattering along the ground. The windows shook and the air itself seemed to vibrate with a sound like nothing I'd ever heard, a strange, all-present sort of hum that seemed to come from everywhere. My eyes darted wildly about the room in my utter panic, searching for the cause. I could swear I caught a glimpse of something outside. It was quick and massive, moving about the sky as if unaffected by gravity. But that awful hum grew. I shut my eyes tight, trying to will away the ache in my skull. That smell from earlier, like burning ozone, grew thick until everyone was coughing uncontrollably. My head spun, and my vision shook. Another explosive sound rocked the air, shattering several of the windows. As quickly as it began, everything ended, the world going eerily still. Part 2. I don't know how long it was before any of us felt comfortable moving, but Clay was the first, shooting to his feet and hissing a string of expletives. His arms ran with scarlet ribbons of blood, trailing between his fingers as he picked out the glass that had caught him. He'd been nearest to the door that had burst with the first few windows and caught the worst of it, though all of our heads rang and stomachs turned with nausea. What was that? Phil asked. His eyes were wide with a look I'd seen on pictures of war veterans or victims of some disaster, a glassy, faraway stare. There was something in the sky. What was it? His voice shook as though he was close to tears. I don't know, I answered, surprised by the sound of my own voice. We should call the freaking cops or something. The National Guard, the goddamn Air Force, Clay cried, his voice cracking as fear and panic still overwhelmed him. I nodded, head still throbbing and mind racing as I went for my cell phone. Feeling like cold water being dumped overhead made the blood freeze in my veins. No signal. I shook my head. There's no service. Clay's face contorted into a look that was a mix of surprise, denial, and terror as he pulled his phone from his pocket. Philip did the same, hands shaking all the while. No one said anything, the two of them staring at their phones with variations of the same expression. They didn't need to say a word. I knew what it meant. Let's just go, I said. I struggled to my feet, the world seeming to spin beneath me for a moment as I gripped a chair for balance. I helped Phil to his feet, his eyes never once leaving the skies beyond the broken windows. Clay led the way, grimacing as his arms continued to run with blood. As we made our way outside, I could tell immediately that something was deeply wrong. That smell hung thick in the air still, but it was more than that. The streets were emptier than before. They're gone. Everything is gone. Clay spoke the thought aloud just as a cold, awful realization dawned on me. The cars were now gone. Both the empty vehicles that had previously lined much of the streets and Clay's own truck were all gone. All of the vehicles but one, my own sedan, was left idling in the middle of the street. With all that happened, my memory was spotty. I felt certain that was not where I'd left it. Clay shook his head, moving aimlessly about the street, head on a swivel, searching for his vehicle to no avail. Finally, he let out a scream, long and full of rage that echoed through the empty streets. Phil just kept shaking his head, muttering something to himself. I hardly had time to react as Clay made his approach, throwing up my hands to partially block the punch he threw. I felt a shock in my jaw, and for a moment I felt heat in my face and the world disappearing behind darkness and flecks of light. The commotion seemed to kick Philip from his stupor, and he grabbed Clay, pulling him away from me. "This was your idea," he cried, accusation heavy in his tone. I ran my hand along my jaw. My lower lip was bleeding slightly, but I was otherwise okay with the exception of the perpetual sting in my face. I know I ought to have left it alone, but I was scared and angry. Days and months of emotions coming to the surface. "You didn't have to come. I didn't make you. Listen, what's wrong with you?" I cried, taking a step closer. Clay laughed, but it was a sound without any genuine humor, mocking and belittling. "You're a snide, self-assured asshole, man. Always happy," he said, his words coated in a palpable venom, but even worse, a sort of confident assuredness that spoke of a conviction behind them, as though he'd thought these things for quite a while. "It's the reason we're the only two people still willing to put up with you. It's the reason for where you are in life with that dead-end job. It's the reason Tracy left. You can't ever consider someone else's right. You chide and make stupid comments until they finally give in to you." I wanted to feel something. Anger, hate, an urge to hit him back even. But I couldn't. Part of me could only sit in the recognition that, in some ways, he was right. "Stop, Clay. This isn't the time," Phil said, putting himself between the two of us. "We need to go." And he turned to me. "I'm gonna have to use your car. You okay to drive?" I nodded, though my thoughts were still on Clay's own words. "Right, then let's go." Clay's eyes lingered on me for a moment. I thought I could see his expression softening before he turned and made for the car. I followed, and until we reached the car, the faint winds moving through the building was the only noise to accompany us. mind raced. Clay's words, the call from earlier, and whatever had happened in the diner all spinning through my head in a vortex of thought. None of it made sense. In this place, that thing in the sky, the cars, it was impossible. I knew that, as we left it behind, it would always bother me like a picture left askew, this blind spot in what I knew to be possible. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? A voice echoed through the empty streets, a woman's by the sound of it, carried from somewhere that seemed both near and distantly behind us. It froze all three of us in place. The same question passed silently between us, as though none of us wanted to be the first to ask whether anyone else had heard it. Hello? That voice again, except this time I felt certain it was somewhere ahead. Phil snapped to face it, the fear that had seemingly dissipated slowly returning to the surface, his eyes darting about nervously. Clay looked at me hard, shaking his head slowly as though he could hear my thoughts. I narrowed my eyes, holding back none of the bitterness I felt. So, some woman is alone wandering this place with whatever the hell that thing is. You want to leave her? Looking back, I can't account for the sudden defiance I felt. Perhaps my ego had finally caught up with the earlier wounds, or perhaps the idea of leaving someone here felt too much like the failure of my relationship. Well, I can't be certain. Likely I'd need the help of a therapist over days of work to understand. Days I do not have. Clay looked as though he wanted to spit in my face, shaking his head, eyes filled with something cold and unrecognizing. You're a fool, he said, and you'll get one of us killed for it. He's right, Phil stammered, though he looked as though he dreaded the words. It wouldn't be right to leave her. Clay scoffed, looking between the two of us and shaking his head. Whatever, he relented, climbing into the back seat and letting the door slam shut behind him. Phil scanned the ground for a moment, sighing for a long moment, before looking back at me. He's pissed, understandably, but I'm sure he gets it. Let's just see if we can find whoever that was. He nodded for me to follow as he made his way towards the car, pausing for a moment. He met my eyes. Just promise you won't get out of the car. We'll drive around and look, and if we can't find anyone, we go. I nodded. Yeah, okay, promise. With that, he made his way into the car. I followed, feeling suddenly very claustrophobic in the vehicle as we began to make our way through the streets. And just listen for her, I said, rolling down all four of the windows as we began moving through the streets at random, listening for any sign of the person we'd heard earlier. At some point, I began calling out, much to Clay's dismay, shouting for anyone to respond. It wasn't long before, eventually, someone did. Please, help me, it's coming. That voice again, much more clear this time, coming from a few streets away within one of the residential areas. I veered left onto the road from where I could hear it coming. My foot settled on the gas, an unusual determination swelling in me as the calls grew louder till we'd arrived outside a house. It was no different than the others, a single-story red brick home with all the windows drawn but one, yet the sight of it sent chills down my spine. The front door sat wide open, yet I could see nothing inside. Clay was already shaking his head when I turned to face them. Fuck, no, look at that place. It's not right. He trailed off, unable to put the feeling into words. Well, I knew what he meant. I felt it too. We all could, staring back at the entrance like the maw of some animal. Yet, as that voice echoed from within, I felt stirred by an uncharacteristic sort of boldness. It's fine, I said. I'm not going to push it. Just wait here, I'll be back. Clay scoffed, and Phil just looked on with sad eyes, nodding almost to himself. Well, I'm coming. Clay looked ready to explode, staring at Philip as though he'd grown another head. You always go along with his bullshit, he said, eyes narrowed as he looked at Philip. Whatever. I'm staying here. You two have fun. If you're not back in 10 minutes, I'm leaving without you both. I wanted to argue, but knew it would accomplish nothing. So instead, I gave a brief nod and exited the car. Phil hurried from the back seat, following behind, and I could hear the sound of the door's automatic lock as we made some distance. The nearer we came to that front door, the more I could see the house inside, with a standard foyer and living room. Nothing unusual, but for the utter state of disarray it was left in. Shelves were toppled and furniture overturned, various things scattered about the floor as though a tornado had somehow moved through the place. Somehow, the opening felt eerie, as though what lay on the other side was more than a mere house, but some other world in which something awful had happened. Part of me wondered if Clay wasn't right and considered turning back on the spot, but the idea filled my mouth with an awful taste of the satisfaction I knew it would bring him. And so, spurred forth by my own ego, I stepped inside. The smell was immediate, like sitting too close to an old television set, just an acrid static that singed at your nose hairs, as was the feeling of a sort of chill that gripped me and made my stomach turn with nausea, my vision buzzing momentarily. "Looks worse than the diner when we left," Phil commented, looking over one of the few coffee tables still on its feet. I nodded, the implications of the thought making me feel uneasy. Broken glass crunched beneath my feet as I stepped forward, peering into the kitchen. On the wall hung a photo of a man, a woman, and 3 children. I felt something shift in me as I wondered where all of the individuals were now and if anyone would ever know. I wondered who it was that we'd heard. There was another question that was clawing at the back of my mind, one I didn't want to acknowledge yet couldn't ignore. Would we join them if we couldn't find her soon? "Help me!" The cry echoed from somewhere deeper in the house, sudden and shrill, making me jump as I spun to face it. Phil's reaction was the same, our eyes meeting as we searched for the source, settling on a door in the hallway ahead. Even at a distance, I could still see the tremors that took him and didn't feel far off myself, but I was there for a reason. "Oh, you don't have to follow me," I said in earnest as I began to make my way forth. Somehow, by the echo from behind the door, I knew there was a basement on the other side. I didn't have to look to know Philip was behind me, breathing nervously and muttering barely silent prayers. I opened the door and we began to descend into the darkness below, hands feeling along the wall for a light switch. I felt something brush past my cheek, a string hanging overhead. Upon pulling it, a dim bulb came to life, offering what little light it could manage. It did little to illuminate what lay in the basement beyond, only really serving to cast eerie shadows along the stairwell, but at least we could see where our feet were to land. "Help me! Help!" That voice again, but not nearly as loud as before or as urgent. I felt one of those unearthly chills as though my body were warning me of something I couldn't yet perceive, and it frightened me. "Do you see her?" Philip whispered, voice still shaking as he stepped behind me, kneeling slightly as if worried that standing at his full height might attract something's attention. It took me a moment to realize I was doing the same. "No, I can't see a damn thing," I breathed back, gritting my teeth at the squeal of the staircase beneath my feet. Feeling its weight in my pocket, I remembered my phone. It had been all but useless since we'd been attacked by whatever that thing was. But the function of a flashlight was the one thing I knew it could still serve. I shined the light onto the ground below, a grey cement slab that seemed to extend through the entire room. "Help! Please, please help!" That voice again, this time so small it was barely more than a whisper from somewhere around the corner. We turned into the basement, the light exposing a small hallway ahead leading to a boiler room. In the hall sat a door, closed, though I could see a light glowing beneath it and hear the woman's voice from within. I glanced back at Phil, his eyes never wavering from the door, and he simply nodded. We pushed forth. "Help, please." The nearer I grew to the door, the more my skin began to crawl. There was something off about that voice, in a way I could only now process. There was an odd hiss to it, a mechanical crackle that I couldn't place. Hand shaking, I pushed the door open. The room was dark, with only the glow of an old television set to prevent total blindness. "Do you smell that?" Philip asked. I nodded, that same ozone scent hanging heavily in the air. It took a moment to process what I was hearing. As it began to click, confusion and dread filled me in equal measure. "Help me! Help!" The voice echoed from the television. That doesn't make any sense," Philip said, voice no longer a whisper as a familiar dread filled his words. We heard it from blocks away. That's impossible." The light of the screen seemed to shine with such sudden force it temporarily blinded us, bathing the room in an eerie white light, the old box set glowing like a supernova. The air seemed poised to set alight, the electric stench so strong I could feel my lungs burning. The house shook, threatening to collapse in on us as that awful sound rocked the earth. The screen of the old television burst in a shower of sparks and glass, scattering across the room. Phil's eyes met mine, a primal sort of terror filling them as his hands clasped over his ears. Something like a shriek, ancient and animal, but put through a computer filter or something of the sort, pierced the air, seeming to come from everywhere at once. All I could do in those moments was cover my ears and pray until the awful cacophony ceased and the air took on that eerie stillness. It took a moment before either of us moved, myself first, scrambling for the phone I'd dropped in the commotion, before hurrying to help Philip to his feet. "What was that? What was it?" he asked, shock still working its way through him. "Come on," I urged, pulling him towards the way we'd come, an answer already in mind. "We have to go check on Clay, now." That seemed to stir him, and the two of us raced out of the house in worse condition than it had been in before and out into the front yard. The weather had seemingly shifted in the minutes we'd spent inside, the clouds dark and foreboding, the wind whipping leaves from trees and lashing its tendrils across my face. The car was gone. The space it had occupied was almost mockingly empty. There was no sign of Clay, and something told me there wouldn't be any longer. Oh, I got him. I hardly realized I was speaking the words as I did, my mind putting two and two together. That thing tricked us, and it got him. The swell of emotion I felt threatened to send me into freefall. He was here because of me. We were on this trip for me, and it was my choice that had gotten him into this. And now, God, and now what? I couldn't even be sure of what I was guilty of. Couldn't even be certain whether I'd gotten my friend killed or simply whisked off for some unknown fate. He was right. Philip breathed, tears streaming openly as he stared at the spot the car had once occupied as if, at any second, it might return. The wind picked up, sending ominous whispers through the trees and tracing an icy chill down my back. We should have left. We should have gone when we had the chance. It's going to get us now. His tone was almost childlike, past the point of fear, almost as though he was stating the dreaded reality. I shook my head, stepping in front of him and gripping him by the shoulders. "Phil, we have to go now. We can walk," I spoke, though in hindsight I think even I wasn't convinced by my words. "This place isn't that big. It'll take maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. We could just stick to the main road and walk out of here." Phil laughed, a sound devoid of humor or mocking or any sort of emotion, cold and harsh. "It's not going to let us go. He gave us that chance and we didn't take it. Don't you see?" Skies above seemed to groan and rumble as a warning of an approaching storm, and yet there were no signs of lightning. The wind grew stronger, whipping my jacket about with such force it almost moved me. Philip just shook his head, staring up at the sky. Too late. The air itself seemed to shake as a sound like the sky tearing open above us threatened to deafen me. The sky above was an ominous grey, every cloud swelling with the threat of torrential rain. And at first I could see nothing but the sunlight filtered grey through the mist. And then there was movement. Brief at first, a flash of something dark enough that the sun couldn't pierce it as it passed between an area where the cloud cover was just a bit lighter. Everything shook, my very bones seeming to move out of place as the sky seemed to split in half. From the clouds above, I could see something emerge. In that moment, it cast a circular shadow almost 30 feet ahead, passing over the street like some new celestial body. If you've never seen something impossible or witnessed something your mind knows inherently to be wrong, no matter how hard it seems to grapple for some sort of understanding, you can never understand what I felt in that moment. I found myself grasping for answers, a nauseating sense of horror racking my body. It's a weather balloon or could find no words, every explanation falling flat in the face of the impossible. Its shape was circular, a perfect sphere with nothing resembling wings or flaps or rudders. It was a pale white, so much so that it almost reflected the light like another sun in the sky. The air hung thick with the smell and taste of ozone, so much so I couldn't help but cough violently. And it was gone again, disappearing into the clouds, moving with such sudden speed I knew it depended on more than the wind. For several moments we saw no sight of it above, yet the sound of its movement grew until the ground seemed to shake. It's coming closer. I spoke the realization, voice hoarse as I sputtered another cough, eyes meeting Phil's. He smiled sadly, and in that moment I understood that I had to flee. I didn't wait for Phil to follow, my legs pounding as I ran back towards the house and away from that thing. The entire world seemed to shake, the air itself somehow vibrating until I could feel it in my bones. A glance over my shoulder told me why. As I passed the side of the house we'd just exited, I caught sight of the object descending until it was barely 30 feet or so off the ground. It was bigger than I'd imagined, at least the size of 3 school buses in length. By the look of it, it seemed entirely composed of some pale metallic substance, almost like a reflective marble. I lost sight of it as I neared the car, but I knew very well that it was directly overhead. It made a sound, like the bellow of some horrid ancient beast had been run through auto-tune as it closed in on him, growing closer and closer until I could feel it, feel the static that seemed to radiate forth from it. I didn't stop, even as the mechanical roar rose to a fever pitch, combining with a human shriek to form a sound so awful, I'm sure it would haunt me for the rest of my life, if I expected that to be long. I chanced a singular glance over my shoulder before passing behind the house and into its backyard. And what I saw, well, I still can't be sure of. It was as though Philip's body was dissolving, coming apart in ribbons of flesh, the air around it visibly warped by some sort of energy that seemed to pour forth from that thing, floating like another moon a few feet over his head. I kept running until there was nothing but the sound of my own breath and pounding heart, long after silence had settled over the town. The shock began to take effect, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving me feel bruised, battered, scared, and alone. I found my way into the local public library. That's where I've been for the past few hours. Staying off the streets. It's not safe. That thing could descend on me at any time and do God knows what. I'm writing this because I've done all I can to try and reach out for help, but to no avail. There's little else in the silence for me to do but perhaps try and write some account of what happened here, in the off chance that anyone finds themselves wondering about the town of Criers Creek, or the even more unlikely scenario that they're wondering about me. To Clay and Phil's families, If you're seeing this and still remember them, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. And to whoever is reading this, be willing to trust the people around you sometimes. Stay away from Criers Creek. There's something in the skies above, something that has claimed this place as its own. So there you go, my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. That was a pretty cool story for your Friday evening's entertainment. Now, I have lots of things planned. Series I want to accumulate, I think that's the right word, and other things I want to sort of push forward. Lots of longer stories coming up now that I've finally finished the academic year in my day job. I've got a bit more time on my hands. So yeah, lots of interesting things coming up. Hopefully more exciting for you than what I've been doing recently. Oh, hope so anyway. So I always hope that. Yeah, try to please you, try to do things that make you happy. So if I'm not, then please let me know. But yeah, doing my best constantly to do stuff that makes you feel good and enjoy what I'm doing. Well, that is enough. Definitely back again this weekend, probably tomorrow night and Sunday. I'm not making that an absolute promise, but yeah, like I said, some big things coming up. So back again very soon. Till then, my dear friends, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Fleshgate by Imperial Invective. Months later, I can remember all of them, down to the slightest idiosyncrasies and quirks. They were my friends, and they're gone now. There's a hole in my life where they were. Sometimes I remember something they said or did, and it'll hit me like a ton of bricks. They're gone now. I'm only left with memories of them. I'm sorry for being maudlin and bringing everyone down, but I think this is the only way I can really introduce my story and explain why I feel like I have to type this out. I think that writing this is the only way I can learn to accept that. I try to keep these downer tendencies to myself as I'm writing all this down, but I can't make any promises. I know that being the third wheel in a group can be a terrible thing, but I can't think of something worse, being the fifth wheel. If you're the third wheel, that makes your group a semi-functional tricycle. If you're the fifth wheel, you're left as some obscure car from the 50s that no one remembers or cares about. Imagine not being able to follow the in-jokes and shared history of one couple, and multiply that by 2. Yeah, getting stuck as the fifth wheel is twice as bad. That was the frame of mind I had as we piled into Ian's car to go to Gila National Forest for our hike. I know that's a weird opening to give to all of this after my depressing opening, but I want you all to have an idea of my mindset. Not quite sure how I know to describe all of this. I do know that I need to tell someone. I need someone else to know what happened and help me come to terms with it all. I think the only way I'll be able to explain this would be to help you see from my perspective as much as possible. So there we were, driving down to Gila for a holiday, with me feeling like the fifth wheel wedged between 2 of Ian's friends who I didn't know. The 3 of us were cramped in the back seat while Ian and his girlfriend were up front. I look back at that unnecessary bit of moping back in August 2016 as one of the last few moments of normalcy I would ever have in my life. Tried to make the best of the situation, I really did. Ian was always the more social of us. Our mum used to tell us that Ian could make anyone his friend, and once I had a friend that I kept them. It was one of those parental platitudes that was given to reassure a socially awkward child that would there was nothing wrong. Unfortunately, it would take me almost 19 years to learn that that wasn't true. Instead of taking my therapist's diagnosis of social anxiety disorder following a breakdown after an office get-together as a means for seeking treatment, well, I used it as an excuse to cloister myself off from the world. I stayed in my apartment when I wasn't working and told myself I was just doing what was best for me. Of course, Ian decided that that wasn't healthy and convinced me to go on a weekend-long hike with him. It wasn't until I showed up at his house at 6 in the morning on Friday, after taking the day off of work, that I saw he'd invited others along. I think he saw it as a means of getting me help and breaking me out of my shell. Unfortunately, though, with Ian's extroverted nature, he didn't realize that I liked being in my shell. It was comfortable. Well, a turtle doesn't like being broken out of its shell. After a brief introduction, where I caught no one's name except for those I already knew, my brothers and his girlfriend Jessica, due to morning grogginess and the rushed introduction, well, we all packed up the car and left for our hike. It took 3 hours of mostly awkward silence for us to reach our destination. Ian tried to make conversation, but my short responses and the others' sleepiness killed him off fairly quickly. We found the parking lot near the Gila Cliff dwellings. As we unpacked our gear, we took a moment to bask in the beautiful sight that sat perched above us. It's hard to believe that someone could carve an entire town into the face of a cliff. But 700 years ago, people managed to do just that. Given that the parking lot was empty except for us, we'd find out why later, and I was in need of some social lubrication, we split a 6-pack of beer and took in the majesty. As we finished our beers, got everything prepared and used the restrooms, Ian explained what path we'd be taking in detail. What we didn't know and what my brother had failed to tell us was that the West Fork Trail had been closed all that summer due to flooding. To be honest, the path wasn't that dangerous. They just opted not to clear it due to the recent flooding, so it would be a bit more of a rugged hike. While it wasn't perilous in itself, it did keep us from encountering other hikers, which would cause a lot of problems when we actually needed help. Ian figured that we could make about 2 to 3 miles an hour. We'd be able to complete the Gila Loop, which was about 30 miles long, with enough time to get back on Sunday and be ready for our respective jobs on Monday, with no one any the wiser that we'd backpacked a closed section of the national park. As his explanation was a bit heavy on names and locations, some of which I can't recall clearly, I'll opt to include a picture rather than spend a page writing about everything. And for the sake of simplicity, this is the path we were planning to take. It's a simple loop. In addition, I'll include a more detailed map of the entire area so you can orient yourselves if you want to trace the trail we took. If you plan on following along with the path as I tell you about this experience, well, all I can say is good luck. Even as I stare at it now, I feel just as lost now as I was then. I was just going along with the group and trying to keep a positive mind about everything. I wanted to try and do a better job of getting to know Ian and Jessica's friends. I think my circumstances had finally begun to set in. I had been living in a quiet apartment in New Mexico for over a year, and I had no friends. I'd go to work and then home without doing anything else. Sometimes I'd spend the entire weekend without saying a single word to anyone or seeing another person. I knew that if I didn't change something quick, that solitude would become the norm, and that frightened me. And our first day was relatively quiet. We spent a majority of the time taking in the sights, soaking in the sun and breathing the fresh air. The hike felt like we were constantly moving upward. As I was unaccustomed to hiking, I frequently fell behind, but I never completely lost sight of my brother's friends. While we took a break under the shade of a tree whose bark looked like dried scales from some long dead alligator, I tried to make small talk with everyone. I fell into a quick conversation with Ian and Jessica about their work and what they'd been up to lately. When it came time to talk to the other two, I only managed to get the conversation going for a few sentences before it shriveled up and died. I remembered assuring myself that it'd be easier when we stopped for the night. We rested for a while before continuing our ascent up the mesa. This was where everyone realized how truly out of my element I was here. The path up the mesa was agonizing for me. It seemed to never stop climbing up, and there was almost no shade to keep the sun from beating down on us. I was sweating buckets, panting and wheezing whenever they stopped to wait for me to catch up. I tried to pretend that I didn't notice their exasperated whispers or side glances, but that was easier said than done. They seemed like the outdoorsy type that had been doing this sort of thing for years. By the time our paths started to level out, I was ready to turn around and leave. It wasn't until we reached the top and looked out over everything that I realized how foolish of an idea that was. Even if I was able to convince Ian to give me the keys and let me walk back to the car and go home, I had no idea where I was going or what trail markers we'd been using. I imagined splitting off from the group and tromping through poison ivy, bumbling into a rapey gang of banjo-playing hillfolk, or getting lost in the dark and wandering in circles until exhaustion and exposure took me. Even if I did manage to hike back to the parking lot, where was I going to go? Would I go back home to my empty apartment, eat a Hot Pocket and feel sorry for myself again? Well, I decided to tough it out and continue hiking. We made camp at a dry section of the Indian Creek after having hiked a decent amount. Ian was confident that we'd make it back on Sunday and that the few days we had were going to be less intensive. We ate some food and stowed the rest in a bear bag a ways from the camp. We were passing a bottle of whiskey around in front of a campfire we'd built, and the conversation shifted to the most awkward moments anyone had ever experienced. Well, Ian retold his story about the first time he met Jessica at a club, where he was way too drunk for his own good and ended up puking into her purse. Jessica bristled at the memory and jokingly called Ian an asshole for that. Well, each person shared their stories about a bumbling first kiss, where their braces got hooked together, locking themselves out of their dorm rooms in their underwear, their cringe-inducing high school edgelord personality, and caring for their drunken boyfriend who puked into their favorite bag. And then the bottle came to me. It was my turn to tell them a story. I instantly knew what my most embarrassing story was, the moment we started the conversation. Didn't tell them about the door, though. Instead, I made up a story about ripping my pants in front of a group of people during a work interview that I'd probably ripped straight from a 90s sitcom. They laughed with me. I felt like a piece of shit. They'd bothered to reveal their most embarrassing moments and were commiserating in their shared experience, and here I was too afraid to tell them the truth, to tell them about the door. Well, the conversation continued for a bit afterwards as we killed the bottle. When it was dead, we went to bed still pretty drunk after dousing the campfire. I woke up in the middle of the night desperately needing to use the bathroom. Still a bit fuzzy from the whiskey, I tromped out into the woods to do my business. It wasn't until I was almost done that Nadia's voice cut through the blackness. She asked me if I had a lighter. Since I hadn't heard her approach, the sound of her voice made me jump. It would have scared the piss out of me had I not just gone to the bathroom. I mumbled something about having a lighter back around the camp. She told me that she'd dropped hers and asked me to help her look for it, but I was way too out of it to be any good to anyone, so I told her that we'd look for it later. I vaguely remember her mumbling a protest as I stumbled back to my sleeping roll. It wasn't until I woke up the next morning that I realized how stupid I'd been. Apparently, they'd heard yowling in the surrounding woods all last night. They thought that the sound could have possibly belonged to the Mexican grey wolf, but no one was sure. Ian knew that they inhabited the area, but were very uncommon. I paled at the thought of being mauled by a wolf while out peeing in the middle of the woods. I decided next time I'd wake up Ian before going out into the woods to answer the call of nature. We packed up a while later after a light breakfast and continued on our hike. The second day was a little better. The overbearing sun I suffered under previously was hidden behind heavy clouds. We crossed a number of rivers as we followed the 157-729 junction. We went along Little Bear Canyon as we headed towards the TJ Corral, which was towards the end of the hiking loop. As the path hadn't been cleared yet, we frequently had to dodge patches of poison ivy and stinging nettles. I fared much better on this hike, and despite nursing a slight hangover, I felt like I was doing a much better job of getting around with my pack and clunky boots that my brother had loaned me. We made camp around midday and purified some water from a nearby river, as the last section of our hike didn't really have many opportunities for drinkable water. I think that maybe our encounter last night with the yipping and yowling wolves had added a bit of seriousness to the hike, as there wasn't as much joking around or conversations this night. We talked a little bit, mainly just had something small to eat while we stared into the campfire. Ian and Jessica were the first to call it a night. I stayed up with the others for a bit, but we were mostly silent. The other two slowly went off after a bit, and I decided to enjoy the warmth a bit longer before getting ready to go to bed for the night. Just as I'd finished dousing the fire, I remember Jerry coming up to me and asking me for the map. He told me he wanted to plan out the rest of our trip, that there was a spring nearby that we should really visit that wasn't too far out of the way. I grabbed the map from Ian's pack and gave it to him before turning in. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Ian rustling around his bag. He sounded angrier the longer he searched. He knocked mess kits into each other as he peered deep into the pack for something that was missing. Frustrated that he wasn't finding the item he was looking for, he turned the bag upside down and dumped out everything. He was practically ready to tear out his own hair, and it seemed like he'd spent the entire morning looking for that one thing. Wanting to know what was up, I walked up to him and we started talking. He asked me, "Hey man, you seen the map anywhere? I can't seem to find it." "Where's Jerry?" I gave him the map last night so we could map out a little detour on the trip so we could visit a spring. "Why don't you ask him? He probably knows," I answered. It was then that Ian said something that changed everything. "Jerry? Who are you talking about? You mean Oliver? Don't tell me you thought his name was..." Well, I explained. "No, I'm talking about Jerry. Tall guy, kind of lanky." "You're joking, right?" He looked confused for a few seconds and made a questioning sound like a really old computer trying to process something moments before it catches on fire. The pieces clicked, and Ian shouted, "Who the fuck is Jerry?" getting the attention of everyone in the area. "Wait, he was... Some fucking guy asked you for our map in the middle of the night, and you just fucking gave it to him? You handed our stuff to some random stranger you met in the woods?" I tried to explain myself and tell him that I knew Jerry, and that he did too, since I remember hiking with him the day before, but I couldn't find the words to convey that point. It was here that Jessica stepped in and asked what was going on. Well, Ian vented vitriol. "How fucking stupid are you, Evan? Some random guy named Jerry comes up to you in the middle of the night asking for our shit and you just give it to him? Jesus Christ, we needed that map to get around smoothly since the trails out here haven't even been cleared." Ian shouted for about 15 minutes while everyone became aware of our situation. Jessica managed to calm him down enough so we could figure out our next move. While we weren't completely screwed, as Ian had memorized a large portion of the trail markers, it was going to be a lot harder to navigate the necessary junctions to bring us back around to the car. We packed up all our stuff, making sure that the guy hadn't taken anything else, and then we left. The entire hike, I could feel Ian's eyes drilling into me. The last time I'd seen him this furious was just before he got into a fight with Aaron Fredlinger and beat him to a pulp. He got suspended for a week, and Aaron got a black eye, a busted lip, and never said anything about our mother again. Each time we came across a break in the path, we spent a few minutes while Ian tried to remember where to go. The fact that the trails had been closed and the paths were overgrown only served to make everything more difficult. I think that's how we made a wrong turn, began wandering on the faint trail. I don't actually know if that's where it went wrong since we didn't have the map at that time. That's my best guess. We were further away from home and safety. Part 2. Towards midday, tensions had reached a critical point. Ian frequently mumbled things that would make a sailor blush, while Jessica tried to hide the fact that she was close to crying. Oliver attempted to lighten the situation by telling everyone that we just had to follow the compass and we get home safe and sound. Oliver's girlfriend didn't say much. She just stared quietly at her feet as she walked. I think she had the right idea, since Lucas was constantly misplacing his footing and slipping. He looked like he'd downed a fifth of vodka and was now trying to walk home on a tightrope while being randomly shocked with a cattle prod. The realization twisted something deep down inside me and made me want to throw up, I stopped walking, began talking to Lucas. "Yeah, what's going on with you, man?" Ian, still pissed off at me, took this opportunity to vent a bit. "Huh? What are you talking about now?" Lucas is bumbling and twitching all over the place. "What's wrong with him?" "Don't be a dick, man. You know he has multiple sclerosis. He told you before the hike started about his condition." As soon as he said it, the events came rushing back to me as clear as day. I recalled Ian pulling me to the side and telling me about his friend's diagnosis and how this was likely going to be his last opportunity to undertake a long hike, so we had to help him and move slowly. I remembered watching him scramble up the trail and thinking about our own mom and her illness. It brought back bittersweet memories of birthday wishes given to us from hospital beds and hearing her sob quietly to herself in the middle of the night when she thought we were asleep. Guilt flooded over me and I stepped forward to apologize to Lucas. When it happened, Lucas growled at me the instant I took a step forward, and he dropped to a hunched position on his hands and feet. It almost looked like his skin was bristling at a possible threat, and I could see his broken and decaying teeth as he hissed at all of us before taking off at a hopping stride into the woods. He moved like one of those CGI monstrosities from the last Planet of the Apes movie. His shaky and unstable balance was replaced by a more natural and animalistic gait as he loped into the distance and disappeared amongst the trees. The last thing I saw was what I assumed were his clothes, sloughing off of its body, revealing that they weren't actually clothes but grey folds of skin. Oliver was the first to talk. What the fuck? As soon as Oliver said those words, it was like a switch had flipped that set everyone to panic mode. We began to run along the trail as if it would do us any good. The only thought in my head was to put as much distance as possible between me and that thing. I think it took a good 15 minutes for us to run out of energy with our heavy packs and the disorienting nature of the woods. As we tried to catch our breath, I surveyed the area around us and came to a terrible realization. In our panic, we'd run off of the path and were now even deeper in the woods. We tried to make sense of what we'd seen. I just remember Ian mumbling the same phrase over and over. What the hell was that? And the short answer is, it was Lucas. The long of it is this. There was no Lucas, not really. Sorry for interrupting the story in the middle like this, but I think now is the best time to try and explain everything. I know how confusing this all seems with Jerry and Lucas. But the truth is, I did that because I don't think I could have appropriately explained it to you without you first experiencing it from my eyes. I don't know what to call those things, but they do something to your mind. They insulate themselves into your memories. They wrap themselves up in a wall of your recollections, and even though you know something is wrong, you can't quite put your finger on it. Your group of 4 friends could grow to 5, and you wouldn't be any the wiser. A part of you will stupidly admonish you for ever wondering how many there were. You look at it, and you recognize the face. You remember events. You remember getting drunk at a bar together. You remember them crying on your shoulder after a tough breakup. You remember everything that happened between you, but none of it's true. I don't know how it does it. It crawls into your head somehow and makes you see things in a way that benefits them. It can mold memories, but it can't mimic human movement. It walks on all 4s, not 2 feet. It growls, hisses, and snarls. It doesn't talk. It infiltrates, observes, and waits. It was hunting us and trying to drive us deeper into the woods. And it was succeeding. We never really reached much of a conclusion about what that thing was, but we did reach a consensus that we had to get out of here as soon as possible. I watched Ian as he looked around at the forest and came to the same realization that I had. We were lost. He didn't tell the others. I think he realized that panicking would only get us in more trouble. Instead, he told us to follow him. With the shock of our encounter setting in, we could do nothing but follow his lead and hope it all worked out. As we walked, we could hear the sounds of distant animals yowling and calling out to each other. The terror of our situation deepened as the others whispered that those were the same noises they'd heard the first night out in the woods. Whatever this thing was, it was following us and calling out to other things in the area. At the time, I couldn't stop thinking about one of them barreling out of the underbrush, sinking its black and rotting teeth into my neck before the rest of the group could react. I remember brushing the thought off and mentally reassuring myself that there were 6 of us here, and we'd only encountered one of these creatures. As the day pressed on, we seemingly wandered south in an attempt to pick up another trail that would lead us back to the parking lot. I couldn't help but shake a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. It felt like I'd forgotten some important deadline that I should never have forgotten about. It wasn't until Oliver mentioned his wish of being back in the car that Jessica stopped dead in her tracks. We all turned towards her, but knew what was coming the second she asked. We only took one car down, right? Well, Ian snapped, more fearful than frustrated. Of course we did. Remember how cramped everyone was in that tiny-ass Prius with all our camping gear smashed in the trunk and on our laps? Well, what about it? Jessica went white, as if this was the first time that Ian had ever raised his voice to her. She paused for a moment before asking, "How many of us here right now, and how many does your car seat?" Ian's car sat 4 people comfortably, 5 uncomfortably, and there were 6 of us out in the woods at that moment. Everything happened at once. Ian swore. Oliver's girlfriend gave a half shriek and a half gasp, while I looked wide-eyed from person to person, trying to figure out which one of us didn't belong here. Sarah was the only one who managed to say something, and that was, "It's me, Sarah." She hadn't finished her words before her jaw popped open. I don't mean that it dropped open like she was astonished at something. It popped open like it had dislocated from her face. Space between her lips was a massive, sickly pink void of inflamed gums that was just at least a foot wide. She looked at us with dead and dull eyes as she slowly raised a twitching hand up to her jaw and tried to lock it back into a more human-esque appearance. She popped it back into place with a hollow-sounding squelch of meat and bones shifting as if nothing was wrong about what had just happened, before she tried to speak again. "It's me." Ian was the first to react. He stepped towards the failed facsimile of human and swung his walking stick at her face while bellowing, "Get out of here." She hopped back from the attack in a sloppy motion and landed on all 4s. Her body shuddered as if an electrical jolt had passed through her as she slowly backed away from all of us while facing Jessica the entire time. She hissed at us one last time before retreating deeper into the woods with a convulsing lope. It took a moment for all of us to regain our composure before we continued walking while trying to look in every direction at once. I remember Oliver rambling as we walked. He kept asking, although no one was responding to him. "Did you see how it moved? It was twitching like an epileptic in a rave. You ever see one of those documentaries about mad cow disease? Oh, that thing was twitching and moving like one of those infected cows. What the hell was that thing? Was it a person? What kind of person can do that to their body? It tried to talk to us. He rambled for hours before we had to stop. We had to tell him to shut up because we were worried about that thing hearing us, though that really wasn't the case. We made him stop talking because it only served to scare us. Despite stopping for the night, none of us actually slept. We sat around a campfire and listened to the sound of a high-pitched whining and yelping coming from all around us. It seemed like any time I actually got close to falling asleep, the calls would start up and jolt me awake. We spoke in hushed whispers and tried to figure out what they wanted with us, even though none of us really wanted the answer to that question. The hours dragged on almost endlessly before dawn broke and we continued our hike. We spent Sunday hiking around, trying to find a familiar sight. Without any real sense of where we were and where we were going, our only hope was to stumble across another hiker or find an area with a high enough vantage point that we could survey the entire area. Unfortunately, any elevations we climbed didn't afford a good view of the area, and it was extremely unlikely that we'd find another hiker due to the fact the trail had been closed and wasn't cleared. Even if we did, what were the chances that we'd trust them and could be certain that it wasn't one of those things? Midway through the day, Ian whispered to me, "Count people wearing backpacks. One of them's with us again." I casually looked over my shoulder and noticed that one of our group was walking without any gear. They trailed behind us, but were still in our vicinity. They moved slowly, but didn't show any of the jerky movements of the previous two. The thought that it was learning to mimic our movements unsettled me. Without really thinking, I shucked off my backpack and approached the imposter. Before they knew what was happening, I shoved them as hard as I could. Oh, the instant my hands pressed into their shirt, I felt something slick and warm give way, like the outer layer falling off of a rotten mango. Their shirt slid off their body into my hands, and I quickly realized it was their skin. The thing was actually naked, but gave the appearance of clothes by altering the color of its almost translucent skin. I dropped the skin that had sloughed off, and it hit the ground with a wet slap. The creature toppled backwards and began yelping. I can only describe the sound like this. Imagine getting out of your bed in the middle of the night to take a piss. As you're feeling your way through the darkness to get out of the room, you step on your dog's tail. Imagine that startled yelp of pain and the shock that comes along with it. Now focus on that emotion you felt when you heard that noise, that sudden surprise and guilt. In reality, the sound it made was nothing like a hurt dog. It just reminded me so much of a wounded pet that I can't differentiate the sounds. And here's the worst part. I shouldn't have felt bad. Those things were stalking and tormenting us. They were likely hunting us, and I felt bad for harming it. I shouldn't have felt bad about it, but it wanted me to, and so I did. The thing writhed on the ground on its back for a few seconds, making a pitiable noise. It reached back with its arms and pushed itself upright on its hands and on the balls of its feet. Its joints popped wetly, and its muscles and bones adjusted to fit this new position. The crab crawled away while shrieking the entire time as Ian pursued it with his walking stick, hoping to catch up to it and cave its head in. It wasn't until the thing disappeared from sight that I realized that the shrieking wasn't just coming from the monster, but from Jessica as well. It was trying to mimic her response. With Ian gone and Jessica's screams possibly drawing more of those things to us, I decided that I had to do something. I stepped forward and wrapped her up in my arms. She was shaking like a leaf in the wind. I stroked her hair and whispered that it was all over. She managed to choke out something about its face. All I could make out, though, was that there was something terribly wrong with its face. She then calmed down as I told her that everything was going to be all right. I didn't believe that myself, but it was the only thing I could think of that might bring her comfort. Ian returned, fuming that the monster had escaped. I awkwardly broke off the hug. Ian didn't say anything. He just started walking. We continued following him, hoping that he'd find the way, but knowing that he probably wouldn't. 6 hours later, we settled down for the night. It felt like we'd been going in circles all day and had made absolutely no progress. For all we knew, the thing could have been tinkering around with our memories and convincing us that familiar landmarks were new and leading us deeper into the woods. I didn't tell the others, but I think I knew what those things wanted with us. They wanted to lead us deeper into the woods. They were going to try and force us to exhaustion. When we were too weak to defend ourselves, they would descend upon us and eat us. Oliver was right about that. That thing is similar to us in any way, and those twitching spasms were likely some sort of prion disorder that came from eating humans. After eating some jerky, since we decided against having a fire and drawing more of them to us, we reached the conclusion that we'd have to sleep in shifts. I volunteered for the first watch because my insight into the monster's behavior had robbed me of any desire to sleep. The others went off without so much as another word. They were exhausted. It wasn't until an hour into my watch that I realized that I was too. Even given the monster's grotesque appearance, everyone needs to sleep. Jessica joined me about 2 hours into my watch. She admitted that she couldn't sleep after our encounter with the creature. I nodded in agreement. Both of us had seen something terrible that the others hadn't. We talked for a good 30 minutes about it, and what we thought was going on and how everyone else was handling it. She was worried about Ian. She confessed that he was acting erratic and that he was scaring her. I wrapped my arm around her for a moment and told her that we were all scared. She looked in my eyes and told me that she was glad I was here. I felt something twist deep down inside me that I'd buried a long time ago when I'd first met her. The longer she stayed with me on watch, the more personal our conversation became. She confessed that she and Ian had been fighting a lot recently, and she was wondering if they were going to work it all out. At the start of their relationship, they were great together. He made her feel wonderful, and there was something that didn't feel right, like there was something missing. I listened to her talk about everything that was going on in her life. I knew I had to do something. I knew that if I didn't do it now, I'd regret it. I had to tell her about the door. She listened quietly as I told her everything. It was the event that had precipitated my breakdown at work and my social anxiety disorder diagnosis at the therapist's office. Everything started off simply enough one Friday at work. I was in the lunchroom eating my sandwich and reading a book, as per my usual, while my co-workers talked about their plans for the weekend. One of them was having a housewarming party, and they were inviting everyone at work. I figured that the invitation was only extended to the people he was talking to, until he asked me if I'd be able to make it on Saturday. As it was the first time I'd been invited to hang out after work, I chose to go. I spent all of Saturday getting ready, planning what were interesting topics to bring up in case there was a lull in conversation, and the bottle of wine I was planning to give him as a housewarming gift. After psyching myself up, I left to go to the party with the bottle in hand and my spirits high. I convinced myself that I was going to be the life of the party, and that maybe if I played my cards right, I could finally find a friend at work that would make the time fly by instead of dragging on. It wasn't until I reached the house that the false bravado began to crumble apart. I stopped in front of the neighbor's house, as everywhere else had already got a car parked there. It was then that I felt my heart beating like I'd just run a mile. I began heading up the driveway with the wine bottle slick in my hands from my palms sweating. It wasn't until I reached the front door that I realized that something was terribly wrong. All that excitement that had been building up since Friday afternoon was now replaced with something else. Apprehension. All those topics I'd thought up seemed boring, and all the reassurances I'd given myself seemed hollow. I didn't feel prepared for this at all. At this point, a small part of me whispered something that has stuck with me to this very day. That voice intimated that they were never really wanting me to come out. They'd only given that invitation as a courtesy and didn't actually expect me to come to their house. It said that if I knocked on that door, that I'd be making a fool out of myself. It told me that I wasn't even comfortable in my own skin, so how could I even dare to imagine that they'd enjoy my company? They wanted to celebrate with their friends. They didn't want to listen to me fumble for something to talk about. All those fears flashed in front of me, taunting me, demanding that I knock on the door and make myself look like an idiot. That part of me told me that I was better off alone, and I listened. I turned around without even knocking on the door and I left. No one had come in and the music was playing loudly, so I doubt they would have even heard me anyways. I shouldn't have been there in the first place. Maybe I saw them watching me from the window. Maybe I didn't. Maybe they were laughing at me as I drove away, flustered and embarrassed. Maybe they went back to the party and joked about the social retard who'd seemingly freaked out and run away from their house, while I went home and cried in the shower. Maybe. Jessica listened as I told her the story. She smiled sadly as I started to cry onto her shoulder. All those feelings I'd experienced outside of my co-worker's house came rushing back. All that fear and foolishness and fatalistic failure smashed into me like waves on the shore. She whispered soothing words into my ear and waited for me to collect myself. Once I did, she pulled away and told me it wasn't my fault. I was there under the moonlight with her face inches away from mine, and I did the worst thing I'd ever done in my life. I kissed her. It was slow, hesitant, romantic. I looked into her eyes and I saw her beautiful face. She pulled me towards her as she leaned back. Lost in the moment, I held her against me while telling her all the things I should have said when I first met her and realized that I loved her. I held her like that for a few moments, afraid that if I let her go, I'd lose this perfect moment. She was warm. She smelled like wildflowers. She smelled like happiness. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt comfortable and content. Part 3. I don't know when I drifted off, but I do remember waking up. In the love-drunk excitement of the previous night, I didn't think once about Ian or the consequences of my decision. I only thought about Jessica, and I forgot that she was his girlfriend. What I did last night was a beautiful mistake. I convinced her to cheat on him with me. I needed to tell him before the truth came out. I needed him to understand how I felt. I got up from the ground and stretched. Jessica was gone. I assumed that she'd gone back to her sleeping role in the middle of the night. I walked over to Ian, who was just waking up. He rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and asked me if I'd stayed up all night. The words bled out of me, and once they started, I couldn't stop. I don't know what happened, man. We were just talking one moment and then the next. Jeez, I didn't mean for it to happen. You know I love you, man. I wouldn't do anything to hurt you. It just happened, and now I can't take it back. Jessica's cry of surprise cut me off before I could go any further. Both me and Ian turned to the sound of her distress, and we knew instantly what had happened. The backpacks with our compass, food, and water had been stolen. It knew. Don't you see, goddammit, it knew. We could identify it without a backpack, and it couldn't shape its skin to take the appearance of one, so it stole them away from us. Now the next time it wormed its way into our group, we wouldn't be any the wiser. Jessica and I never talked that night. Jessica had never left my brother's sight that night. They had zipped their sleeping rolls together. She didn't open up to me about her worries, and I never actually kissed her. I poured my heart out to a thing wearing Jessica's skin while it was in my arms. I confessed my truest feelings to an ersatz entity masquerading as a person. And I felt sick. The others woke up quickly after hearing Jessica screaming. We quickly searched around the area, hoping to find some scrap of food or indication of where our stuff had been taken to. We found nothing. It was long gone. We had no food, no water, and no hope. No way of telling when one of those things was hijacking our heads and pretending to be a part of our group so it could distract us. With our compass gone, we had no means of following a set direction, hoping to pick the trail back up. In short, we were screwed with a capital S. Oliver demanded to know what I was doing last night. He wanted to know how I could be so careless as to fall asleep when I should have been watching over them and our gear. I lied and told him that someone had come around in the middle of the night to relieve me from my shift. I didn't mention that it was one of those things impersonating Jessica. I couldn't bear to look either my brother or his girlfriend in the eyes at that point. Oliver started to yell, but stopped when he saw I was on the verge of tears. I don't know if it was mercy or disgust that caused him to stop. Doesn't matter either way. We gathered up the only thing they hadn't taken in the night, our sleeping rolls, and continued walking. The hike without water or the prospect of food was unbearable. We were already exhausted, and the realization that we were soon going to be starving and have dehydration only served to sap more of our energy. Within a few hours, my mouth felt gummy and dry. Although we were still under the canopy of leaves, the temperature was still in the high 80s and low 90s. It didn't take long for dehydration to set in. I kept licking my lips in an attempt to keep them moist, but I could feel them beginning to crack as my saliva began to dry up. As we walked, Oliver picked up his pace and caught up with me. I looked over at him and knew without him saying anything that another one of those things had joined our group. He whispered, "Don't look directly at it. Just keep it in the corner of your eyes. I think that's how it messes with your mind. It'd explain why you remember that guy last night, but the rest of us can't. You saw him, but the rest of us didn't. Now don't get close, just keep it in the corner of your eyes. It's been trailing us for about a half hour now. I think it just wants to watch and follow us. I pretended to be cracking my neck and looked at the tag-along in my peripheral vision. It trailed behind us by about a dozen feet. In its resting state, its facial features appeared staticky. I could make out eyes and a nose, but it was constantly shifting and rippling like bubbling plastic. At this point, we were too tired to even bother chasing it off. We just kept walking and hoped it wouldn't try to join the group. It seemed content to keep its distance and keep us in its line of sight. It followed us for about 2 miles before it broke off towards the trees with a shambling, awkward gait. We were too tired to even try and set up a shift system. We just huddled together in an attempt to convince ourselves that we were safer when we were closer together. But every time one of us got comfortable enough to drift off, those things would start making a noise. The noises started off as high-pitched yips, whose sounds seemed to travel for miles. And as the night drew on, they grew more aggressive. I remember one time I was drifting off hearing the grating rasp of my name. Evan. The things weren't just following us, they were learning. They were perfecting their mimicry. The thought disturbed me more than the idea of them out there watching us in the darkness. I mean, how long would it take them to become more human than human? What would they do once they were capable of walking amongst people again? I drifted off to sleep with that thought beating around in my head, like a man trapped inside a wall. We got up on Tuesday morning and left without a word. At this point, there was nothing left to say. Some of us had been awake all night without any food or water. The constant stress had completely worn us down. We continued hiking in the same direction we'd been going in, with the false hope that we'd come across someone. In the end, our hike looked more like a death march. My feet were covered in blisters that had ruptured and plastered the soles of my feet to my socks. Every step felt like I was tearing open the wounds a bit more. In an attempt to take my mind off the discomfort, I focused on my brother, who was walking in front of me. He wasn't as much walking as he was limping forward. He stopped using his walking stick and was dragging it behind him like it was a broken limb. I watched as he stepped over a rock and the walking stick slipped out of his hands. He kept dragging himself forward as if nothing had happened. He didn't even register it falling out of his hand. It was at that point I knew that something was wrong. I knew that my brother wasn't my brother anymore. I quickly picked up his stick as I passed it. Amy went to call out to ask him if he was all right, but I shushed her. I was so sure that one of those things had replaced him and was now leading us deeper into the woods. I realized that I would only have one chance at this. The instant it knew that we knew, it would try and run away. All it would take was one good swing at the back of its head and we'd be able to take out one of those things. Well, the stick had a bit of a weight to it, about 5 or 6 pounds, enough to crack open a skull if it was swung hard enough. I began walking faster while trying to avoid the underbrush that might give away my approach. The thing wearing my brother's skin continued limping forward as I drew closer. I waited until I was within swinging distance before raising the stick above my head. My heart was beating in my chest and my palms were so sweaty that it felt like the stick would slide right out of my hands. I kept on moving forwards, completely unaware of what I was about to do to it. I whispered, "I'm sorry," just before I swung the walking stick down with all my strength. Ian turned to face me as he mumbled groggily, "Sorry for what?" My muscles locked and I stopped mid-swing, and the stick stopped just inches away from his face. He blinked in surprise before muttering, "Evan, what's wrong?" His voice sounded distant and empty, like he was in between a waking and sleep state. It was then that I knew the extent of his condition. He was pale and looked like the slightest breeze would blow him over. He wasn't one of those things. He was just delirious from dehydration, sleep deprivation, and starvation. The walking stick fell out of my hands and bounced on the ground next to us. I dragged my tongue across my lips, and it felt like I was licking sandpaper. And I whimpered, "Geez, Ian, I thought you were one of those things. Oh God, I'm so sorry." He didn't react to my apology. He just turned around and continued walking in the direction we were going in. Amy just watched everything unfold numbly, before she started following him. Oliver shook his head sadly, but he didn't look any better. His eyes were glazed and his lips were cracked and red from rubbing at them. I watched my brother shambling forward, and it reminded me of one of those old voodoo movies where someone is just put into a trance and forced to work until they die from exhaustion. His mouth hung open, and he moved like he was being dragged along on puppet strings. I picked up the walking stick and began to follow them. I wondered how much longer he had left in him and what any of us could do if he just fell over and stopped walking. I wondered how much longer any of us had. I don't know how long we walked. Everything melted together in a muddled malaise at the time. I remember losing my footing and tripping several times, but I barely felt it. The third time, I didn't even realize I was laying on the ground until Jessica stepped on me as she was passing by. There was no apology. She was too far gone to recognize what she'd stepped on. I dragged myself to my feet and felt lightheaded, but continued putting one foot in front of the other. And the fifth time I fell, I wondered if it would have been better just to lay down and wait to die. An excited yawp behind me from one of those things drove me to my feet. It wasn't until we bumped into the sign for Little Bear Canyon that I realized how close we were to salvation. The post for Little Bear Canyon also had a branching sign that pointed in the direction of TJ Corral, which was only a few miles from where we'd started at the Gila Cliff Dwellings, if we walked along Route 15. Ian was heading in the right direction. We were almost home free. In my excitement, I began calling to the others to let them know that the end was near. I looked around at me and shouted, "Jessica, Ian, Oliver, Heather, Amy, I know where we need to..." The words died on my lips as I counted the names and realized it wasn't over yet. The others kept moving as if they hadn't heard me talking. The imposter shuffled alongside us, and for once it was easy to identify. I don't know whether or not they'd let down their guard after seeing our conditions, but this one was obvious. She moved slowly, but her movements didn't convey her exhaustion. Everyone else was sweating and looked like the walking dead, but she was fine. I waited for her to get close enough to follow the trail the others were going down before I raised Ian's walking stick and growled, "Turn around right fucking now. I can see you." She turned around slowly, and I felt my heart skip a beat. She looked almost exactly like Jessica, except for a brown tinge to her hair. She could have been her twin. I knew what it was planning before it even opened its mouth and asked, "What are you doing, Evan?" "Don't call me that," I winced. "What are you rambling about? Please move out of the way. We're almost safe from those things." "I know what you are." Heather turned white at the realization, and she began speaking quickly. "I'm not one of those things. Please, Evan, you have to remember, there were 6 of us. Those things want us to think there were only 5 so they can take one of us out without the others caring. Those things don't want us all. They only want the weakest one. Please, let's go before they..." "Shut up," I snapped. I raised the walking stick in my hand and brandished it at her. "Think about it, Evan. Do I move like one of those things? Do I even speak like them? That should be enough to prove I'm human." "No. Ian's my brother. Jessica's his girlfriend." "I'm your girlfriend. I sat on your lap on the car ride. Please don't kill me, Evan. I love you. Don't you remember? Evan, I love you." I lowered the stick that was in my hand as memories bombarded me. I'd met her one night when my brother forced me to go out to a club with him. Heather had been sitting at the bar all night drinking. It wasn't until she tried to stand up and fell into my arms that we actually talked. I remembered lazy Sundays in bed watching cheesy B sci-fi movies. I remembered holding her close to me and making love and hearing her whisper sweet nothings into my ear. I remembered our life together. I rasped, "Heather, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." She cooed. "Evan, it's not your fault." She went to touch me and I sprang back like I'd been bitten by a snake. The instant I heard those words, I knocked. The stick caught her unaware in the side of her face. I felt her jaw give way under the sudden force of my attack. She burbled through broken teeth, The The second strike dented her temple as the temporal bone shattered. She kept trying to talk, but it was too late and too much damage had been done. That door was shut to me now. I kept swinging the walking stick down on her head until it splintered and snapped. I looked up from her twitching body and saw my brother watching me in horror. Heather, oh my God. I spoke through gritted teeth and regarded him with red-rimmed eyes. Come on, we have to go. He went to keep talking, but I walked past him. I didn't want to explain it to him. He eventually ran ahead, invigorated with the prospect of finding rescue on the road. I looked behind me one last time. The last thing I saw was one of those things dragging away Heather's corpse. It looked emaciated and half mad with starvation. At that very moment, I wasn't afraid of the thing. I just felt pity. Whether or not it forced that emotion on me, I'll never know. I turned away and caught up with the others on Route 15. We were on the road for about 15 minutes before we managed to flag down a car and an ambulance was called for us. The doctor said that our exposure to the elements, combined with our starvation and dehydration, triggered the auditory and visual hallucinations we'd experienced. It's the typical response you'd be given after hearing our half-dead ramblings about creatures warping their flesh and our memories to drive us to the brink of death so they could prey on us when we were at our weakest. We spent a week there while receiving treatments, recounting our horrific experiences and then subsequent psych evaluations before we were released. I tried to talk to the others about it. Ian and Jessica refused to talk with me. I don't really know Oliver or Amy, so that's off the table too. They just want to forget. But I can't forget. Well, here's the thing. I still remember Nadia asking me to help her find her lighter. I recall staying up late and talking with her by the campfire while she smoked like a chimney. I can recite Jerry's terrible puns that he'd make about almost everything and Lucas's determination at hiking this trail while slowly succumbing to the effects of his multiple sclerosis. I can recall whispering sweet nothings to Jessica under the glow of the full moon. I can still envision that moment as clear as day, even months later. I know the conversation we had word for word. I can remember the feeling of her skin against mine and the smell of her hair as I pressed myself against it when I reached for it that one true moment of connectivity. I remember Heather pleading and begging me not to kill her. Now, despite writing all this months later, I can see all of those things clearly. Sometimes late at night, I can even remember driving up the Gila National Park with Heather sitting in my lap, playfully grinding against me and telling me how fun our hike was going to be. Sometimes I think about that memory more than I should. Since I can't talk to my brother or Jessica about this, I had to find some other outlet. I guess I'm writing all this for that one reason, catharsis. In the end, I keep wondering if what I did was right. Did I make the right choice? I want you to read this and tell me that I had no other option, that the risk of one of them escaping into the city forced my hand. But I know that's not the case. I could have walked away or tried to scare her off, but I didn't. What kind of person can look into someone's eyes, remember all the things they did and the life they had, and do what I did? Who can have all those memories and end everything so callously? It doesn't matter if none of it was real, because in that moment, it was, to me. Who can look at someone and feel such love for them before you kill them? The answer to that question is simple now that I ask myself aloud. But I just don't like the answer. Okay, so a long one there for your Friday evening's entertainment. Oof, I do love these creepy forest stories. That one kind of developed really interestingly. I remember reading a story like that before. Okay, what would you have done? Was it all just hallucinations and delusions because of the lack of food and water? Well, it is a possibility, isn't it? That's probably more horrifying than if they were creatures. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say below the video in the comments, and I will do my best to join in the conversation as I always do. And I'll be back again probably at the weekend sometime. I don't know. Sunday? Sounds good, doesn't it? All right, so I'll see you on Sunday. Till then, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. A typical day, eh? Well, how about this? 5 a.m., morning prayers and a strong coffee. 7 a.m., review today's unusual cases. 9 a.m., blessings, prayers, and maybe the odd exorcism. 12 p.m. lunch, hopefully uninterrupted. 2 p.m. counseling, more prayers. 5 p.m. paperwork, yes, even exorcists have paperwork. 7 p.m. evening mass and reflection. 10 p.m. sleep until the phone rings. Sound like your kind of day? Well, then it's time to listen to this story. The 5 Rules of the Vatican Exorcist by Augustus Cordoba. Part 1. My phone rang at around 3 a.m. I didn't need to check the screen. I already knew it was the Cardinal. Father Mitchell here, I answered, my voice cracked and groggy. We need you in Genoa tonight. That was all. No apology, no explanation, just a location and a ticking clock. Well, that was his way. I packed fast. 3 days' worth of clothes, my Bible, and a black folder slim as a blade. It held 5 rules, the 5 rules. Not many, but each one was bought with blood. Not ink, blood. Every rule had a body behind it. The Vatican's jet was waiting at a private strip just outside of Rome. The pilot gave a cursory nod as I stepped aboard. He didn't say a word. Smart man. 4 hours later, I was standing in front of a nondescript apartment building in a quiet Genoese neighborhood. Too quiet. A local priest waited near the door, his face pale as wax, fingers twitching at the beads of his rosary. Father Mitchell, he muttered, thank you for coming. Talk. The Romano family, their daughter Giulia, 10 years old, started talking to someone no one else could see, and then, incidents. Things are moving, marks on the walls. Well, the parents left it all off until yesterday. What happened? Well, the mother walked in. Giulia was floating. I nodded once. Anyone else been inside? The family doctor. He called it psychiatric. Gave her meds. She take them? No, the mother refused. Good. I walked toward the stairs. Right, stay here. Rule 1. First contact is yours alone. Bring no one. First encounter with a potentially possessed or afflicted individual must be conducted alone. No assistants, no watchers, no holy witnesses, just you. Not because it's safer for you, but because it's safer for them. Entities test the edges of presence and perception. They react violently, or manipulatively, to unfamiliar energies in the room. If someone else is there, it will know which one of you breaks first, and it will use that break like a lever. What waits inside feeds off eyes and fear. You give it both, and it grows. The mother opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been standing there waiting. Her eyes were raw, red-rimmed, hair tied back in a frantic ponytail. "Father Mitchell," she breathed. I gave a short nod. Where is she?" "Her bedroom. She hasn't left it since yesterday." The air was colder inside. Not freezing, just wrong. I opened the folder. Rule 2. You watch before you speak. 60 minutes, no less. When you arrive, do nothing but observe for the first full hour. Let them talk. Let them twitch. Let them try. You're there to listen to the lies it tells with its body, its silences, and its stolen voice. Don't announce yourself. Don't introduce your mission. Not yet. The moment you speak, the game begins. So wait. Time it. Learn the pattern. You're not a hunting person. You're stalking a predator that knows how to pretend to be one. I need to see her, I said, but I won't talk to her. Now, don't say my name. Don't tell her why I'm here. Mother led me down a narrow hallway. Well, the place was neat, lived in. Photos of smiling faces, old holidays. Julia was there in all of them, grinning, wholesome. We stopped at a closed door. Crayon letters on white paper. "Keep out." "Julia," the mother said softly, "there's someone here to see you." Nothing. She opened the door. The room looked like any little girl's room. Pink walls, shelves of toys, a desk stacked with school books. Julia sat cross-legged on the bed, eyes locked on a blank wall. Pajamas with smiling cartoon things I didn't recognize. She didn't move. Not a twitch. No shifting, no blinking, just stillness. Wrong stillness. "This is a friend," her mother whispered. Julia didn't react. "I'll give you to..." "No," I said sharply. "Stay." Rule 3. Never be alone in a closed room with the affected. If a door locks behind you, open it. If a window shuts, unseal it. Always have a line of light to air, to witness. Because if you're alone in a sealed space, you're not just in danger, you're already compromised. The possessed will speak in the voice of a child, a lover, a dead parent. It will crawl into your thoughts if given silence and shadows. A locked room is its sanctuary, not yours. Don't give it that ground. Well, the mother hesitated, confused, but she stayed. I dragged a chair from the desk and sat. Not close, just far enough. I didn't speak. I watched. That was the rule. 53 minutes passed. Nothing. Then, Julia spoke, still staring at the wall. "He says you're breaking the rules." The mother gasped. "Who says that, sweetie?" I raised a hand, sharp, silent, cutting the mother off before she could speak again. Rule 4 rang in my skull like a gunshot. When it speaks of the rules, shut up and listen. If the entity acknowledges the rules, your rules, do not question it. Do not debate. Do not correct. It should not know them. If it does, you've already lost ground. Arguing only draws you into its rhythm, its logic. Once you start speaking its language, the game is no longer yours. Acknowledgement of the rules is a tell. Note it, but keep your mouth shut. Julia's voice was a whisper soaked in shadow. "He says you weren't invited properly." I pulled the notepad from my coat pocket and scribbled a single line, handed it to the mother. She read it, her eyes flicking over the words, and then met mine with a small nod. She turned back to the girl, voice trembling but steady. "Julia, I invite this man into our home to help us." Julia's head moved, slow, unnatural, until her gaze hovered just between us, not on us, through us. "He, accepts." I checked my watch. Yes, 7 minutes left, observation only. So I waited. When the final second ticked down, I finally spoke. "My name is Father Mitchell. I'm here because your parents are worried about you." Her eyes locked onto mine with a predator's focus. "They should be worried about themselves." Why's that?" "'Cause they broke the agreement." I nodded like it was gospel. Rule 5. Show no doubt, ever. Speak like a man with God's hand on his shoulder, even when you feel like a lamb among wolves. Entities smell doubt like blood in the water. It's not just fear, it's an invitation. A single flicker of uncertainty, a moment of confusion, and it will find you. Your silence, your posture, your eyes, all must say, "I already know." Bluff if you must, but never let it see that you're guessing. Doubt is a crack, and cracks let it in. What agreement?" "The one they made before I was born." The mother flinched, shaking her head like she could shake away the words. "No, Julia, we never made any..." Then came the smile. Not a child's smile. A predator's grin. Something old hiding behind new skin. "You promised to give something back after 10 years. Time's up." I turned to the mother. Could you get us some water?" She left without a word. I leaned closer, keeping a strict 3-foot distance. Rule 3 was not optional. "Look, I know you're not Julia," I said, voice low, steel wrapped in silk. The girl tilted her head, all curiosity and teeth. "Then who am I?" "That's what I'm here to find out." She laughed, the sound of something that remembered screaming. "The others were more fun. They played games." "What others?" "The ones before you. They all failed." Rule 4 screamed in my ears. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just nodded. "How long have you been with Julia?" "Since before she had a name." The mother came back, handed me the water. I didn't drink. "Mrs. Romano," I said, standing, voice now for the living. "I need to speak with you and your husband in private." In the living room, I sat across from both of them. The father had just come in, still in uniform, reeking of night shifts and stress. "Has Julia ever had imaginary friends?" "No," the father answered. "She's always been practical, grounded." "Any interest in the occult, horror movies, Ouija boards?" They both shook their heads. Mental illness in the family?" "No," the mother said, fierce and final. "This isn't in her head. This thing, it's not her." "Look, your daughter is still in there," I said. "But something else came with her, and it's not leaving on its own." They didn't hesitate when I said I needed to stay. Offered the sofa like it was sacred ground. That night, after the lights dimmed and the house went quiet, I sat in the dark with only my rules for company. All 5 committed to memory, but reread anyway. Ritual. Armor, I guess. Rule 1. Never bring others with you on first contact. What waits inside feeds on attention, on fear. Rule 2. Observe for 1 hour before speaking. Rule 3. Never remain alone with the affected in an enclosed space. Rule 4. When it mentions rules, do not question, do not argue. Rule 5. Act as though you understand everything it says. Doubt feeds it. Simple rules, hard earned, paid for in blood. Part 2. Then came the sound. A creak. A breath, not mine. Julia stood in the hallway watching. I rose, slow, deliberate, and stepped back toward the kitchen, out of the living room, out of the trap. She smiled, eyes glinting like wet stone. You're different from the others. What others? I asked, voice flat. They all wanted to drive me out, but you're just watching. I'm patient. It won't work. Your patience. I've waited longer than you've been alive. I said nothing. She stepped closer, and the air shifted. Do you want to know what happened to the others who tried to help me? I remembered Rule 5. Stayed silent for a beat, and then nodded. They failed. She grinned. Because they didn't follow the rules. A flicker of something passed across her face. Surprise, maybe, but it died quickly. You know more than the others, she said. Hey, why this family? I asked. Julia's mouth curled into that same unnatural smile. Because they invited me. How? They made a wish, she whispered, voice like wind sliding over broken glass. 10 years ago, they couldn't have children, so they wished for a daughter, no matter the cost. And the cost was, you. She nodded, slow and deliberate. I keep my agreements. Now it's their turn. What do you want from them? Her features shifted at this. Older now. Something ancient lurking beneath the skin. A simple trade. I gave them 10 years with a child. Now I get 10 years with a body. I didn't flinch at this. That won't happen. Julia laughed, cold and sharp. It already is. Every day there's less of her and more of me. Soon there won't be anything left of Julia at all. Why tell me this? She stepped just close enough in. Because it's more fun when you fight it. The others did. I liked watching them fail. Go back to bed, Julia, I said, my voice steel. She locked eyes with me, a long, dead stare, then turned and walked away. Well, I didn't sleep that night. Sleep was a luxury I stopped trusting years ago. Instead, I prepared. From my bag, I drew the old wooden box. The tools inside hadn't failed me yet. Blessed salt, holy water, a silver crucifix worn, smooth with use, and a vial of anointing oil. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Identification, the most dangerous part of any encounter, because to name it, you have to draw it out, and these things never come quietly. At dawn, I made coffee in the Romano kitchen. Mrs. Romano joined me, face pale and hollow. She hadn't slept either. How many others have tried to help Julia? I asked. She didn't answer right away, and then said, 3 priests. Each one stayed a day or two and then left. The last one wouldn't even talk about what happened. And after they left, she got worse, more distant, cold. I nodded. I'd seen this pattern before. Well, today will be difficult, I warned. I need to provoke it, to find out what we're really dealing with. Will it hurt her? No. Julia won't feel anything. But what you see might, disturb you. She gripped her coffee cup tighter. I just want my daughter back. I placed my hand over hers then. Well, that's why I'm here. The sun climbed in the sky, dragging daylight through the blinds like a reluctant hope. I hadn't slept, didn't need to. The entity would be weaker now. Daylight never kills these things, but it makes them blink. The parents were in the kitchen when I came back from a quick shower. Mr. Romano were called in sick. His wife stirred eggs that no one would eat. She's still asleep, she said. Good, I replied. We need to talk before she wakes up. They sat across from me like prisoners waiting on a sentence, hands locked together, knuckles white. Right, I need everything, I said, especially the birth. Anything unusual? They exchanged a look then. Something silent passed between them. We had trouble, Mrs. Romano began. 5 years, 3 miscarriages. Mr. Romano picked it up then. We tried everything. Fertility clinics, diets, doctors, even a spring in Greece. People said it had healing properties. Nothing worked. Then what? Mrs. Romano lowered her eyes. My sister, she knew someone, a woman. I didn't say a word, because I already knew where this was going. A healer, she called herself, living on the edge of the city in a rotting old house, wrapped in vines and silence. My sister said she helped a friend get pregnant after years of failure. Did you make any promises to her? I asked. Mrs. Romano looked puzzled. We paid her. It wasn't cheap. Nothing else, no vows, no spoken agreements? No, Mr. Romano answered, but something had shifted in his face. A memory resurfacing. Wait, she did say something, odd, just before we left. What did she say? Exactly, word for word. Well, she said, the child belongs to both worlds for 10 years, and then a choice must be made. We thought it was just a mystic babble. 3 months later, I was pregnant, Mrs. Romano added quietly. I nodded slowly. The pattern was becoming clearer. Her name? Maria, Mr. Romano said. But she disappeared years ago, after Julia was born. We went back to thank her. The house was abandoned. I wrote the name down. The Vatican archives would have something on this. They always did. Okay, tell me about the pregnancy. It was perfect, Mrs. Romano said, and I could see the grief bleeding behind her eyes. After all those miscarriages, no sickness, no pain. Even the birth. 4 hours, no complications. The nurses said Julia was the calmest baby they'd ever seen. Too calm? Mrs. Romano blinked. Yes, she hardly ever cried. The doctor thought it was strange. Right. Another box ticked. I'd seen this before too many times. One more question. Did Julia ever speak of another place, another home? They exchanged that look again, the one that screamed guilt wrapped in confusion. When she was 3, Mr. Romano said slowly, she used to talk about her other house. We thought it was just a phrase, imaginary play. What did she say about it? That it was big, dark, full of friends, and Sometimes she went there while she slept. I closed my notebook then. Right, that helps. What's happening to our daughter? Mrs. Romana asked, voice trembling. A crash then tore through the hallway before I could answer. We ran. Julia stood on her bed, arms stretched high, her bookshelf laid toppled over, books scattered like fallen soldiers. He's lying to you, she said to her parents. Her eyes never met mine at this point. He can't help me. No one can. I stepped forward slowly, keeping the parents close. Rule 3, never face it alone. Good morning, Julia, I said. Or should I call you by your real name? She looked at me, eyes colder than any child should own. You don't know my name. Not yet, but I will. And she leapt from her bed, smooth, predatory. They all thought that too. I turned to her parents. Look, I need you just outside. Door open. Do not leave. Mrs. Romano hesitated. But your rule. You'll be in the hallway. Close enough. I need to speak to it alone. They slipped out of the room then. I watched their shadows on the floor. Still visible, still safe. I turned back to the thing wearing Julia's skin. They're not your real parents, are they? She tilted her head. What makes you say that? Because you didn't choose them. Maria did. She found 2 broken people and dressed up damnation as a miracle. Ah, a flicker. She remembered. She made them an offer. 10 years of a child they could never truly keep. She made them an offer, didn't she? 10 years of a child they could never truly keep. Very good, Father, Julia said, her voice lower now, rougher. Something crawling beneath the words. But knowing the terms won't help you. What's the price? After 10 years, the girl returns to where she belongs, and I stay. Possession. She smiled, a mouth full of secrets. Oh, such an ugly word. I prefer exchange. And if I stop this exchange? You can't. They agreed, and all bargains must be honored. They didn't understand what they were agreeing to. Ignorance doesn't void a contract. This isn't a contract. It's a trap. Julia laughed, and it wasn't a child's laugh. It never had been. Call it what you want. 9 priests tried before you. 9 failed. I narrowed my eyes. Mrs. Romano only mentioned 3. She doesn't know about the others. They came before, while Julia still wore the mask of a girl. Maria sent them to, check on her investment. Her smile stretched at this point, cruel and knowing. None of them followed your precious rules, she said. I kept my voice steady. I had to confirm what I was dealing with here. Each kind had its own weakness. Are you a demon? I asked. Julia laughed. It was sharp and mocking. So human. You need your neat little boxes. Answer the question. No, she said, tilting her head. Not by your definition. Well, a spirit, a ghost. Closer, she said, her tone turning cold, but still wrong. I reached into my coat, pulled out a silver cross. Julia stared at it, unimpressed. That won't work on me. We'll see. I held it out. Nothing, no hiss, no recoil. That ruled out several types at least. I switched tactics and unscrewed the cap of a vial. And this. She smirked. Holy water. Splash me'll just make the bed wet. I capped it again. She wasn't a ghost, not a demon, not a spirit. No. Something older. You make deals, I said. Exchanges. You give people what they want for a price. Her eyes glittered like a knife in moonlight. Everyone wants what they can't have, and I provide solutions. And Maria is your agent? Maria Eleanor Sophia, she said, voice like cracked ice. She's had many names, many lifetimes. She finds the broken ones, the desperate, the damned. And you take children as payment. Children are vessels, she whispered, running her hands down the sides of her body. Pure, unshaped. This one was molded for me. 10 years of growing, a perfect fit. Now the final piece clicked into place. You're a changeling. Part 3. Julia's expression hardened. That's one of your words. Folklore gets it wrong. The swab doesn't happen at birth. It happens later, after the deal. The Romanos never agreed to that. They did. A child of both worlds for 10 years. Then a choice must be made. Those were the terms, that was the deal. But they didn't understand. Not my problem. God, I'd had enough. Changelings could be bound. Not killed, not easily, but they could be held. I reached into my jacket and drew out a small cloth bag. Her eyes narrowed at this. What's that? Something to help Julia. I opened it, revealing a fistful of small iron nails. She hissed and backed away. Iron didn't harm her. It trapped her. Put those away. You know I can't. Then I stepped forward. You'll hurt the girl. Julia will be fine. You're the one who should worry. I dropped the nails in a tight circle around her. They hit the wood like a death knell. She screamed. No, not Julia's scream. This was older, primal, and just plain wrong. And the parents burst into the room. What are you doing? Mrs. Romano shouted. Helping, I said, holding my ground. Don't break the circle. Julia collapsed, clutching her stomach, tears streaming down her face. Mom, Dad, he's hurting me. And Mr. Romano started forward, but I blocked him. That's not Julia. It's trying to get out. Please, Julia sobbed, her voice breaking. He's gonna kill me. Mrs. Romano shoved past me before I could stop her. Oh, my baby. Oh, wait, I shouted. Too late. She crossed the circle, kicked several nails out of place, and just like that, the sobbing stopped. Julia's face twisted into something cruel. Her grin cut like wire. She seized her mother's wrist. Thank you, she said, and the voice was deep again. Adult, cold. Mrs. Romano tried to pull away, but couldn't. Julia, you're hurting me. Julia's not here right now, said the thing inside her, but I can leave a message. I moved fast, crossed the threshold. Rule 3 shattered. Never be alone with the entity. But I was already in the fire, and there was no turning back. I grabbed Julia from behind, yanking her away from her mother with all the force I could muster. Iron and salt, I barked at Mr. Romano. Get the salt from my bag. Julia writhed in my grip. Her strength was just wrong. It was twisted and unnatural. Her fingernails ripped into my arms, carving bloody trenches into my flesh. Mr. Romano came running, container in hand. What do I do? A circle around us, now. As he poured, I held her, barely. Oh, her body jerked and bucked, all pretense gone. She wasn't pretending to be a child anymore. You broke your own rules, priest, she hissed in my ear, her breath like ice. Now, you'll bleed. My skin burned where her hands clung to me, a fire that came from somewhere older than hell. Oh, I nearly let go, but I didn't. The circle, I shouted. He completed it, a thin white line snapping shut with a finality I felt in my bones. And Julia went limp. Just like that. I lowered her to the floor, careful to keep her inside the ring. She lay still, her eyes shut, shallow breath rasping in and out. Mrs. Romano hovered in the doorway, her voice cracking. What did you do to her? I trapped it, they said, panting. The changeling can't reach inside the iron and salt. Not right now. Changeling, Mr. Romano repeated. Ancient thing. Makes deals, steals lives. It's been nesting in your daughter for 10 years. Tomorrow's her birthday. Mrs. Romano's voice dropped to a whisper. Tomorrow? Yeah, that's why it's moving now, I said. The agreement's almost up. At midnight it takes full control. Unless we stop it. Mr. Romano's jaw clenched. What do we do? A ritual. A severance. It won't be easy to watch. Will it hurt Julia? Mrs. Romano asked. She won't feel a thing, but the thing inside her will. Oh, it will scream, lie, beg, fight. It will wear her skin like armor and use her voice like a knife. How long will it take? I check my watch. The ritual starts at midnight. Until then, we hold the line. But what if she wakes up? Mr. Romano asked. She won't get far. That barrier binds her, but it won't last forever. I looked down at her, at it. Julia looked like a child asleep after a long day, but I knew better. That thing was in there, coiled like a viper, waiting. I need to prepare, I told them. One of you stays with her here at all times. If she moves, speaks, cries, do not break the circle, no matter what. They nodded, too stunned to argue. I stepped into the other room and reached into my bag. The book wasn't the Bible. The church kept this particular one locked away, buried behind stone and silence. Pages older than some nations, bound in leather dark as dried blood. This was the book for when prayers weren't enough. I found the page, the ritual of severance, meant for parasites, the old kind, the kind that wore faces and smiled. It needed 4 things: iron salt, silver, and blood, freely given. When I had the first 3, the last would have to come from them. When I returned, Mr. Romano was sitting by the circle, eyes locked on his daughter's motionless form. Has she moved? He shook his head. Is she still in there? Our real Julia? Yes, I said, but not for long. That's why we fight tonight. Mrs. Romano came in carrying a tray of coffee, her hands trembling. You look like you need this. I took a cup, grateful. The warmth burned my hands, but I welcomed the pain. It meant I was still alive. Right, we have work to do, I said. They looked at me, frightened, pale, but ready. Tell us, Mr. Romano said. What do you need? I told them everything. How we'd have to reinforce the circle, how their blood would seal the ritual. Not taken, but given voluntarily. Oh, and the clock was ticking. Midnight was coming and hell was knocking. Will this kill the changeling? Mrs. Romano asked. No, I said. Things like this don't die here, but I can send it back to wherever it clawed its way out from. The hours dragged. Julia lay still, unmoving, a loaded weapon with a sleeping trigger. I spent the time reinforcing the apartment, protective glyphs over every window and every door, symbols meant to ward off nightmares made flesh. The sun bled out over the skyline. Just before night swallowed the city whole, Julia stirred. Her eyes opened, and they weren't hers anymore. There was nothing childlike left in them. They were cold, calculated, and ancient. "Nice trick with the salt," she said, voice low but controlled. She sat up inside the circle, legs crossed like a meditating predator. "But it won't hold." I stepped close to the edge of the circle, the line between the world and whatever stared back at me from Julia's face. "It only needs to hold till midnight." She chuckled, dry and hollow. "You really believe your little ritual's gonna work? Stronger priests than you have tried." "Maybe they didn't have the right tools," I said. "And you do?" she sneered. "You don't even know what I am." "You're a changeling, one of the ancient deal-makers." Close," she smiled. Didn't belong on a child's face, that smile. "But not close enough." I narrowed my eyes. "Oh, then what?" She leaned forward, eyes glinting with something cruel. "I'm what comes before the bargain. I'm what waits in the hollow between longing and regret. Not a changeling. I just wore one's skin." Damn, the chill in my blood went deeper. "Oh, you're a wish-eater." Her grin split wider. "Very good, Father. Now you're getting warm." Oh, God, wish-eaters. The kind of monster they buried in sealed vaults beneath the Vatican. They didn't just make deals, they feasted on them. Ancient parasites feeding on desire, taking root in those who asked for too much. No exorcism would touch something like this. No, I needed something older, something darker. I'd have to break the rules. The last of the light vanished from the sky. Shadows filled every crack. The hours slipped through my fingers like blood. She watched me from the circle, calm, patient. Yeah, she knew she had time. "You're thinking about it," she said. "I can see it. The others did too, but they were cowards. The rules protect you, but they also cage you." "Why are you telling me this?" Julia's shoulders lifted in a shrug that didn't belong to her. "Because I'm bored. It's more fun this way. I've played this game longer than you've been alive. Oh, most of you bore me, but you're interesting." Mr. Romano entered, holding a glass of water. He placed it by the edge of the salt line. In case she's thirsty." "She doesn't need water," I said quietly. "That's not your daughter in there." Oh, he looked down at her, and she looked up, eyes wide and shimmering with tears. "Daddy, I'm scared," she whimpered. "Please don't let him hurt me." Well, Mr. Romano faltered. His hand twitched and his knees buckled. "Julia." I grabbed his arm. "It's not her. It's lying. That's what it does." The thing twisted Julia's voice then, coating it in honey. "He's hurting me, Daddy. He's gonna send me away forever." "Don't listen," I barked. But Mr. Romano pulled from my grip. "What if you're wrong? What if you're hurting my little girl?" And there it was, the seed of doubt. God, it always came to this. It turned the family first, made them question, made them choose. "Oh, Pietro," Mrs. Romano's voice rang from the doorway. "Remember what she was like yesterday? That wasn't Julia." The thing inside Julia dropped the act then. The smile vanished, and her eyes sharpened to razors. "You should listen to your husband, Mariana," it said coldly. "He's the one trying to save your daughter." I turned to Mr. Romano. "We need to talk. Now." Out in the hallway, I told him everything. No more games, no more softened edges. We needed to know the truth, every brutal inch of it. The entity is a wish-eater. It feeds on desperation like a leech on blood. It gave you what you begged for, a child. But the cost was Julia. So Julia was never real? Pietro's voice cracked, barely holding it together. She's real, I said, but not untouched. The wish-eater didn't just give you a child, it embedded part of itself in her. A seed, and it's been festering inside her for a decade. Tomorrow, on her birthday, it takes full control. His face crumpled. "And your ritual, can it save her?" I didn't answer right away, and the silence said enough. "The ritual I prepared won't touch a wish-eater. I need something stronger." What's stronger than that?" I pulled out my black folder, thick, worn at the edges, smelling faintly of ash and holy oil. These rules were written to keep us alive, but sometimes surviving means breaking them. "Which rules?" I pointed to Rule 3. Never remain alone with the possessed in an enclosed space. "Look, I need to be alone with it. No eyes, no hearts it can twist, just me and the monster." "That's suicide," Mariana said, stepping into the hallway, her voice tight with fear. It's the only way. Otherwise it'll play you like a fiddle, and I'll lose." "What about the others?" Pietro asked. "Rule 5, I said, tapping the page. "Always act like you understand what it's saying. It's doubt that feeds it." "But I won't pretend. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to confuse it, make it doubt itself." They shared a look. Not hope, just the dull recognition that this was their last hand to play. "You've done this before?" Mariana asked. "No," I said, "but 9 priests have failed doing it by the book. That all ends tonight." Pietro nodded slowly. "What do you need from us?" "Leave. 11:30 sharp. Go to the church down the street and pray. Don't come back until after midnight, no matter what you hear." Anna flinched. "What if you're wrong?" "Then you'll hear nothing at all." They agreed, hesitantly, fear clinging to them like smoke. Part 4. 11:15 p.m. I gather the tools: salt, iron nails, a silver crucifix, and a blade. Small, sharp, personal. Blood would be needed. At 11:25 p.m. I built the fire high. Now, heat won't kill a wish-eater, but it makes it nervous. At 11:30 p.m. they left. Pietro looked back once. Julia, no, the thing, waved her tiny hand, grinning like a jackal in a doll's dress. I wrapped Julia, still within the salt circle, in a blanket, careful not to break the line, hauled her into the living room and set her near the fire. "Just you and me now, priest," it said, "breaking your precious little rules." I widened the salt ring, doubled the iron nails. "Oh, won't hold me past midnight," it said. "It doesn't have to." I pulled a chair to the edge of the circle and sat, alone, enclosed. Rule 3, well and truly shattered. "What now?" it sneered. "Going to bore me to death with sermons?" It laughed then, sharp and ugly. "The Vatican must be scraping the bottom of the barrel." I didn't speak. just opened my notebook to a blank page and started writing. "What's that?" it asked. The mocking edge in its voice had dulled. "New rules." "New?" It laughed again, louder this time, but it was forced. "You can't change the rules in the middle of the game." "Why not?" I asked, not looking up. "You do." Silence. For the first time, it hesitated. "You're not playing by the rules of a wish-eater." "No," I said, still writing, "because you're not playing fair either. Real wish-eaters don't possess. They manipulate from the shadows." Its smile twitched then and slipped. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," I said. "And more importantly, so do you." I looked up from my writing, my voice steady and cold. "You claimed you were a changeling, then a wish-eater, but you're neither, are you?" "I am what I say I am," it growled. Oh, I shook my head, eyes locked on its borrowed face. "No, you're not. You're something else, something that wears masks and feeds on the blind." The fire threw sharp shadows across Julia's face as a thing inside her scowled. "Does it matter what I am?" it spat. "I'll still take the girl at midnight." "Names have power," I said, pen still scratching across the page. "A true name gives you leverage, control." "You don't know my name," it hissed. "I'm working on it." The ink bled black under my hand. Let's see. You make deals. You target desperate parents. You use agents like Maria. You favor young girls as vessels. Its grin twitched and cracked. It hadn't expected this. "Stop that," it barked. I didn't. 10-year bargains, a deadline, a price. I said stop. The thing tried to rise, but the salt held it fast. "Yeah, you're bound by agreement," I said, tone sharper now. "That makes you one of the Covenant breed." "Yeah, that narrows it down." The clock on the wall ticked, loud as a heartbeat. It was 11:45, 15 minutes to midnight. I set the pen down, my eyes finding Julia's, finding it. Yeah, you're a Pactus Vorax." Oh, the name struck like a blade, and the thing recoiled. How did you... "Vatican Archives," I cut in. 2,000 years of blood-soaked records. The Pactus Vorax doesn't take souls. It devours promises, poses as changelings, wish-eaters, demons of the crossroads. But it's always you underneath, isn't it? His voice dropped now, low and guttural. "Knowing my name means nothing." "No," I agreed, "but it tells me where to hurt you." I stood, circling the salt line like a predator now. Pactus Vorax can't break a direct promise. Can't cross salt mixed with the blood of the bound. It must show its true face when confronted with its own terms. "You're bluffing," it snarled, but I heard it, the break in its breath. Fear. 11:50 now. 10 minutes left. I drew the blade from my pocket, dragging it across my palm, and the blood dripped into the salt. "This isn't the ceiling blood. That has to come from the Romanos." "Then you failed," it snapped, voice regaining venom now. "They're not here." "No," I said, "but I have something better." I reached into my satchel and pulled out a folded document. "While you were trapped, they signed this." I unfolded the paper. Formal, legal, and final. A revocation, nullifying any pact made with Maria or any entity she represented. "It won't work," the thing said, but doubt had clawed at its words. "Well, you mentioned the clause yourself," I said, stepping closer. "A child born of two worlds, 10 years, and then a choice. You assumed you got to choose, but nowhere, nowhere does the agreement say who makes that choice. The entity's eyes widened, flickering like black coals in Julia's skull. No, no. They chose, I said. They chose to keep their daughter. That's not how this works, it roared, Julia's voice warping into something ancient and rotted. Then show me where it says otherwise. 11:55, 5 minutes left. It started to tremble, searching the invisible lines of the pact for a crack, a loophole, anything. They wished for her. They loved her. 10 years they paid in blood, fear, and sleepless nights. That was the cost. This is a trick, it screeched. The Vatican has no power over this. No, I agreed, but I'm not acting for the Vatican tonight. Then I stepped inside the line. I'm their representative, and they've made their choice. 11:59, 1 minute. The thing inside Julia began to thrash, rage, and panic, twisting her limbs like wire. You can't do this. She's mine. No, I said. She belongs to her parents. Oh, and to herself. The grandfather clock began to chime. Midnight. The entity screamed, an inhuman howl that splintered the air. Julia's body arched, her fingers clawing at the air. By the terms of the agreement, I said, my voice rising to meet the storm, I bind you to your word. 10 years are up. The choice has been made. You have no claim. It shrieked, and Julia rose off the ground, suspended like a puppet on a frayed string. Oh, you tricked me. I outsmarted you, I said, just like you've outsmarted desperate souls for centuries. The 12th chime echoed through the apartment, and then there was silence. The fire crackled low, casting warped shadows on the walls, and then Julia spoke. It wasn't her voice. No, it came from somewhere deep and distant, like the last breath of a buried god. This isn't over, priest, the thing said through her mouth. There'll be others after me. The desperate always make deals they don't understand. There'll always be people like me to stop you, I growled. Her body seized, a violent spasm that twisted her limbs like broken twigs, and then she dropped to the floor, lifeless as a puppet with its strings cut. The salt scattered, the circle undone. I moved fast, dropping to one knee, checking her pulse. It was faint, but there. Shallow breath, but steady. Right on cue, the door slammed open and the Romanos stormed in, breathless and wide-eyed. Julia, her mother cried, falling to her knees beside the girl. Julia's eyelids fluttered, and her eyes, when they opened, were just a child's again. Human and free. Mom, Dad, what happened? They pulled her into their arms, sobbing like the world had been returned to them. I stepped back, silent, watching. Yeah, let them have this moment. The rules were meant to keep us safe. I'd broken most of them tonight. That's why we'd won. Not with holy water or Latin chants, with the entity's own chains twisted back around its throat. An hour later, Julia was asleep, truly asleep, for the first time in weeks. I sat in the kitchen, the Romanos across from me, eyes hollow but hopeful. Is it really gone? The mother asked. Yes, I said. The Pactis Vorax can't come back unless someone invites it in. And Julia? She's herself again. Whatever pieces of it were left in her, they're gone. Mr. Romano leaned in. You broke the rules. Will the church punish you? I gave him a tired smile. Look, the rules have their place, but sometimes you don't win by following them. You win by rewriting them mid-game. Mrs. Romano reached across the table and gripped my hand. Thank you for our daughter. I just nodded. There was nothing left for me to say in words. The next morning I was packing up when Julia found me by the door. She looked like any other kid now. The ancient thing behind her eyes was gone. You're the one who helped me, she said. Not a question. Yes. I don't remember much. Just you fighting it. I knelt down to meet her gaze. Hey, you fought it too. You'll hold on long enough for us to find you. She nodded, solemnly. Are there more of them? Things like that? There are, I said, but they can't hurt you unless they're invited in. There are people like me who stop them. Good, she said, then gave me a quick hug before running back inside. Outside, under the grey morning sky, I called the Cardinal. He listened without interruption, then said, You broke the rules. I did. They exist for a reason. To guide us, I said, but sometimes they become cages. There was a long pause. Write new ones. What? Write new rules based on what you learned, so the next one doesn't walk in blind. I thought of the Pactus Vorax, of how it had used our dogma like a shield, betting we'd never step outside the lines. I'll write them tonight, I said. As I climbed into the waiting car, I opened my black folder and stared at the 5 sacred rules I'd shattered to save that girl. And beneath them, I wrote a 6th. Sometimes to kill the monster, you have to break the cage